Video games like Postal.
Going postal.
Going postal. New video game. It's called Postal.
There are a lot of people that really wish we would go away, but it's never going to happen.
Their whole premise is so over the top. It's so ridiculous.
There was a video game called Postal. We just ran around shooting people.
Oh, this is going to piss off your viewers, isn't it? Oh, well.
Going Postal, The Legacy Foretold. A new documentary about the history of running with scissors. On Apple TV, Amazon, and Blu-ray. Go to goingpostaldoc.com. That's goingpostaldoc.com. And tell them In the Keep sent you. Hey man, are you tired? Coffee's just not doing it for you these days. Let's talk about something different. Let's talk about cacao. Cacao comes from the Theobroma plant. Broma means food, and Theo means, well, God. So why aren't more of us talking about this godlike food source? Packed with antioxidants, polyphenols, theobromine, which is like caffeine but without the jitters, healthy fat, low carbs, protein, magnesium, calcium, and the highest plant-sourced concentration of iron known to man. Why aren't we consuming this stuff every day? Well, you can. Our partners at Cora Cacao offer ceremonial-grade cacao, sustainably sourced, plant-to-paste from fair trade farms in the Mayan motherland of Guatemala. Cora Cacao is committed to delivering cacao products to you at reasonable prices in a way that makes the world a better place for all involved. Whether you're making morning cocoa lattes, iced cacao, hosting a meditation ceremony, or just doing alchemy in your mom's basement, Cora Cacao is committed to supplying you with the highest grade stuff for what you, your body, and your mind need. So head on over to coracacao.com. That's coracacao.com. Use promo code INTHEKEEP, one word, all caps, at checkout for 10% off your order. It's time to replace those bad habits with good ones, and using Cora Cacao for your energy and nutrient needs is a great place to start. I'm proud to call Cora Cacao a partner of In the Keep, and I hope that you will be proud to call them a new part of your daily routine. Much love.
Eternal Diary basically became a thought process. It started August 2024 when my father, Robert, passed away. And at that point, like most people that go through when you lose a parent or a loved one, you start to talk about, it's all about stories. You remember, whether it's a wake or whatever, however you get together with people, you start to remember the person. And so when that was all going on, in the days following, you kind of put the box together with their belongings, and then it goes on a shelf somewhere, and each year it kind of gets less and less. So with that, after my father passed, I sat down, being a writer for many years in television. I started writing down my father's stories, everything that I knew about him that were fresh in my mind, his vacations. He lived a wonderful life. He lived in Manhattan till he died, and overlooking the East River. He lived a great life, great vacations. So I really started to tell his story, and then the story tied to myself, my brother, and his 5 grandchildren. And as I started to write it all down, each day I was writing a little more. And then from August to November, when Thanksgiving rolled around, it was our first Thanksgiving without my dad. And so we kind of were reminiscing all of that. And I was up in New York for that from Florida, and I had my laptop, and I sat down Friday morning after Thanksgiving, and for tech people, I basically started to create a chatbot, standard what people use in banking or any other place where you're just getting information from a chatbot. But instead of putting in that information, I entered this document that was what I called the life of Robert.
Right.
And I started to ask the chatbot all the all these questions, and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, it's Lee." And then the next thing you know, it's kind of like he's answering me in chat form, and I'm like, "Okay, this is really cool." So I kind of tied it into a live feed in the calendar, and I I typed in Jake's birthday is next week. Jake is my son, but his birthday is in June. And the chatbot wrote back to me, no, Jake's birthday is June 6th, the longest day, which is what my father always called his birthday because it is the longest day.
Right.
And I realized at that point that I had something, like I had some form of memory legacy happening in this simple chatbot. So, to me, that was the turning point in what Eternal Diary would be, and then it was very easy to hey, I started asking everybody for voicemails, and we were able to clone his voice fairly quickly. So, we were able to go from the chatbot to voice.
Which AI
The
models
hard
are you
part
using
was how do
to
you
do that?
create a live stream and of basically a live avatar that's gonna lip sync, that's gonna be able to think, and that's where the tough part came in, and we were able to do it. Took us a little while to get we're still developing a few final pieces in it, but it's fully operational. We're going to launch Eternal Diary on my 60th birthday, September 5th, 2025 this year. So
It's
again,
a
I'm
really
gonna be
amazing.
60, I'm not a kid, so it's kinda cool to be able to do this in the later years of my life.
Yeah. It's a crazy fast turnaround actually, like from idea to implementation. But like
Who needs
so you
sleep?
well, me like I just had a kid like 2 weeks ago, so I need some
Congratulations.
sleep. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, I, so you're using AI to power this. Like what models are you utilizing? Or is it just one? Is it multiple ones?
Well
Which features?
well, we started using a lot of open source software to create everything, and
Right.
while we were doing that, we were developing our own proprietary software, so, we were using to for the audio. It was really easy. It was 11 Labs was able to clone our voice, technology very quickly.
Mhm.
As far as the the avatar models, um, I don't wanna give away the farm, but basically what we were able to do is create, multiple movements and what you would probably think of in, like, a 1980s science fiction movie where you kinda have this robot and then you have this skin over it so that we could create the avatar, which would be head movements, which would be um, blinking, but we created all the movements and then made them a little bit more random so that you can't count like what the moves are. They go very, and then the skin of the person that we would call, you know, whether we want to call it the bot or the avatar or the eternal soul, however you want to call this, would basically fit over that. And that way, randomly, it could change their clothing, but the movement of the person is all generated underneath. So
Yeah.
that we created this world that you're just really putting this 3D modeling skin over it.
So are you programming this, or do you have like a team of programmers and you
I
just
have
use
I
AI?
have a team of developers. When I first came up with it, I could only take it so far.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I have some code, but, it's not this was gonna take a little bit more. Like I said, I was able to get to the voice level very quickly in developing that with a couple of, open source, APIs. So that was But to get us to, it took 120 years to get from basically the phone call to the video call. We're trying to basically get from text bot to live, to live simulated FaceTime environment where one person is real and the other person isn't, and they're having a conversation as if both people are real.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is that it's so personalized, and obviously that's from teaching it to behave like the person in question. Which is I'm sure that's a difficult task that we can also talk about. But I mean, even now, if I would go on Claude or ChatGPT or something like that, and I say, I would like to speak with Dr. Moriarty from the Sherlock Holmes series, or and just tell it to pretend to be that person because it can pull data, it can really accurately like represent someone, at least in chatbot form.
Right.
And the same thing applies to like I even one night I was just going down a rabbit hole with ChatGPT, like who all can you be, and what trying to figure out where it will cut itself off ethically. So for instance, if you ask ChatGPT to pretend to be Jesus of Nazareth, there are certain things that it will not say because it doesn't want to offend anyone.
It's got ethical
Yeah,
barriers and
right.
guardrails that it knows not to do.
Right. So one of the first questions that came into my mind when I was like reading about this and looking at your website and everything, I was like, all right, she's going to listen to this too, so it'll be funny. I love my grandmother so much. So Mama has uh innate character flaws that you might not consider to be moral by the standards of a lot of tech companies, right? But if it wasn't for those things, she wouldn't be her. So if I wanted to preserve her and then I asked the chatbot a question that I know how she would answer it, but the chatbot has like some sort of moral barrier that prevents her from saying that. Those are things that I'm wondering how people are going to interface with this technology.
Okay, so great. By the way, Tyler,
Yeah.
great question, because I think that this is the great part about this. This
Right.
is a relationship between you and the system. How you want that to be determined is up to you. And I'll give you a great example, okay? You have cameras in your house. You now have a baby. So you might have nanny cams and cameras like that.
Mhm.
That is between you and the camera.
Very
Okay.
American of it.
You can look at
I'm
the
with it.
camera every way you want. Nobody else could see that camera. Now, if somebody was to hack into your cameras and can see your wife or your children walking around topless or naked, it becomes a totally different scenario for what those cameras represent. It is the exact same thing with eternal diary and the software. This is not out there. So if somebody speaks in with, we'll call, talks like a sailor, right?
Right.
You have that right to have that person talk like that because you don't want to take that away. Now, if you want to put guardrails in when your children are older and you don't want them talking like that, you can control that through the system of who calls, because everybody, there's a 3-tier system. It's an account
Mhm.
number,
Yeah.
it's a username, and it's a password. So if you have siblings, your relationship with that person, that eternal soul, is your relationship with them in the way that it's entered,
Mm.
so that it's the way you remember a story, so that everybody can kind of have their own relationship with that same person.
Right.
So it's kind of how you remember. Now, if your grandmother was to enter this in her own words versus in kind of like the posthumous version where somebody passes, like what I did with my father, if it's in her words and the way that you'd want to do it, then that's the greatest thing. But I don't want to be the ghoul and build this software and wait for everybody to die,
Yeah.
for this to work. I want people to be able to take this. So, getting back to your question, I think that it's a relationship that you have with the person, that you can have that then be that person. Now, we had a question come up, because we ran a whole bunch of focus groups and said, "Well, what happens if somebody, um, loses their wife? Somebody in their 40s loses their wife. They wanna do this, they want this relationship, but they want to create this environment where their wife is talking to them topless." Okay? And that becomes a little bit morally different versus what you're talking about. Should we be able to have those guardrails? Okay. And not only is that person that is passed, uh, wife, maybe a mother or a father, but it's also a child to the parents that may still be alive. So do you want to have that? And those are the ethical questions that I think we deal with more. And as we get closer to launch of, I think that would have to be a separate entity for somebody who would want to do this, that we can put that into the questionnaire, that we can have that with somebody. Because I mean, you look at the bill that was just passed, the Take It Down Act, right?
Mhm.
So we can only be as good as what the person that is saying they are and who they're talking to. We don't know if it's a real person or if they're trying to create somebody else. So we have to set up, those are the guardrails that we want to be able to set up, that it's not just you do this. Look at a dating site. Right? Dating
Yeah.
site, you put up 10 pictures. They could be you, they could be somebody else. And there's zero guardrails in dating sites. There's no criminal background checks. There's nothing. It's just a portal for two people to meet. So, we have to have those guardrails, but we don't want you to feel that stifle how somebody speaks if it's between you and that person.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's so many interesting questions that, I mean, probably only your lawyer would be able to answer at a certain point where, like, let's say someone, comes to you. Do you have, like, a way to verify that they actually have a relationship with the person that
We
they want
we
to
we have
replicate?
a verification system
Uh,
so that it's more than just, "Okay, I'm gonna pay for the service using my Gmail," or
right.
by, you know, or the App Store. The App Store is a great way to be able to verify a lot of information, but there is going to be, we're not gonna ask for, unless there's a question that's coming up through through the portal that doesn't seem to make sense. There are going to be red flags that will come in if somebody's like, I want to see, some so and so naked or whatever. There will be flags that will come to us, but we expect there. I mean, when we're talking about hopefully somewhere between 1.2 and 2 million users within the first 2 years of operation, we have to be safeguarded. We can't just have a room full of 4 people, that are monitoring that many accounts. So we have to be better than that.
Yeah, it's, I just think about, like, if someone were to acquire, like, someone else's information, right, which happens every day. Like, I got your
Every day.
email, I got your voicemail, whatever the hell it is, and then I just wanna replicate that person and then potentially use that to, I mean, for fraud or even for some sort of, like,
One
weird
one
twisted
hun one
self-delusion, like some
100%.
yeah,
I mean, some of the safeguards that we do is, when did the person pass? What was their name? Those are safety checks that we go to find out. Very easy. Records, state, county, local records of when somebody passes, those records come up. So we know if that person passed or didn't pass. If we don't get a match to that name, to that date of birth, to those things, it's
mm,
gonna flag it immediately.
yeah, and
And that nothing is going no they can't go live until we know that it's good. Like, it's not like you enter something and then suddenly you get an email and you're using the app. It's gonna take time from the time that they sign up, upload audio, upload photos, upload the data. And so while we have about a 2 to 3 week turnaround is what we're expecting. And when we do that, there will be safety checks. And like I said, the easiest safety check is this person has this person passed? Does the date of birth match that person? And then who's signing up? We're going to be able to check who the just through our basic background check system of whether these people are the real children, where their address, their email, all that stuff's going to go through a pretty detailed questionnaire and system.
Yeah, I think about, like, what if my buddy passed away, and he is the kind of person who would help me defraud a credit card company, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many weird things where you're gonna run into, like, okay, well, at a certain point, this is technology, it's really not the person, and I wonder what kind of relationships people will form with the technology itself. We already have so many weird cases, even now, like, we had recently, there's reports of this 14-year-old kid who had essentially had an AI girlfriend and then ended up, taking his own life, and, of course, that the question of whether or not that's on the tech or it's on the mental health of the person and the individual, their family, their surroundings and all that stuff is obvious, but you're gonna, regardless of whether or not it's your fault, deal with a lot of, like,
On the
the
grief side of this,
yeah, yeah,
that um that there is going, and I've been doing a good amount of grief podcasts, which are very helpful. And I think, to them, and, we're not here to replace the person.
right,
Is to um use artificial intelligence to able to recreate um a person in this voice and in the way that they did it, if you wanted to call it a novelty. But
mm,
I think that from we're talking to the grief people, you look at this for a percentage of people, not for everybody. For a percentage of people, it's helpful because what's the one thing when somebody passes? Everybody says, "I want that. I would have liked to have one more conversation." Now,
right,
having this conversation is not going to be with the real person, but here, for a percentage of people, hearing the voice, seeing their image, be enough for them to move on from that, knowing that it's there. And when we're talking to people every day, Tyler, we hear stories of what people would like to use this for. I was talking to a guy who's a stand-up comic, and his dad was a stand-up comic, and he would love to do, like, basically dueling stand-up comedy routines with his dad using a monitor and talking to him and interacting with his dad, which he never got to do as a comic.
right,
Now, a woman that interviewed me yesterday, she goes on tour and talking about her father, who is known as the dancing chef, and she talks about that he left her a unfinished book. She finished the book, and that's what her podcast and what her talks are about. She wants to use this to bring her dad on tour with her to talk, and the book that he basically wrote will be the source of all the information that she could ask about when he danced and sang for Frank Sinatra, that's in the book, that he could tell that story. So there's interesting takes to this. Again, it's not for everybody,
mm.
but we think that enough people will try it, like it. Some will be like it's hokey, but I can't guarantee you that everybody's going to like it. But we hope that people get some enjoyment out of it.
Out of, like, your team, it's aside from yourself and programmers, user interface designers and such, like, what does that look like? How many people are operating?
We have very strong marketing team.
Mhm.
They're getting ready for a huge blitz. Um, we have uh, the good thing is I come from a family of lawyers, so
Yeah,
um, that's always a good thing. So we have a legal team that's on this every step of the way. They look at everything. I mean, because like I said, yesterday they passed this Take It Down Act, which we have to look at is how does that affect us too? Because we are working in AI and we are working in live video. As far as financial teams, we have to look at that. And I have to say, like, we've been trying so hard to work within the boundaries of the United States for a data center because all of this has to be processed. All the data has to be processed, and as everybody knows, there's a reason why every time you call your bank that you calling India, or you're calling Vietnam, or you're calling Thailand, and all those people are going to be out of work in months because that level is going to be replaced by bots because all they're doing is reading prompts anyway, and so you could have any voice reading that prompt. So where we want to do the data center, I'm in South Florida. We would love to keep it as close to here as possible and see how many people we're really going to need, how much the system will be able to flag stuff, and how many people will need on that side. So we're ramping everything up, pretty solidly to as we get closer and closer, it's going to be more people that are going to come along. Um, I think that from the app standpoint, like we talked, it's like legal is a major factor in this just because we're dealing in AI and we're dealing in uncharted territory, very much how social media was probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. Please take a moment to tell at least one other person how much you enjoy the show. That's right. Grab that link and send it to that buddy you're thinking of who you know would be interested in what we're talking about right now. Maybe post it somewhere. I know it seems scary, but you can do it. I believe in you. Don't hesitate to leave a comment and a 5-star review, a like, wherever you're listening. And if you want, Patreon supporters for this show get episodes early, access to our secret Discord channel, chances to suggest questions to our guests, our games, and whatever else I can do for you. Every little bit helps. This podcast directly supports my ability to do what I love and take care of my growing family. The link is in the show notes. Thank you, bless you, stay in the keep. I find a lot of the moral objection to these things interesting, because I feel like it's in the same way that people are like, "Oh, the electric car will never happen," and then of course it happens. But even back, when the first automobile was invented, it was like, well, people have been riding horses for centuries. Like, there's no need for this. Who's going to get gasoline? How are you going to get gasoline out of the ground? And technology moves on. But there was a time, when the first photographs were starting to come out and people thought that was morally offensive. Like, you can't have a photograph of a dead person. You're supposed to mourn that. So I'm wondering, have you talked to grief counselors, to clergymen, just different people who have moral stances on this stuff?
As a person of faith, I never want somebody to feel that this is the person. That I think that from a moral standpoint, if you take the religious aspect from this, there's definitely going to be moral objection because, it's kind of that you want the memory of that person to be the memory of that person.
Right.
So, when we're recreating this, it becomes, there is without a doubt, a moral background to what we're doing. So I want to be able to say to the people out there that are thinking of this, that it's a sacrilegious thing. It's not. We're not claiming that this is the person. It's an image of the person using their voice and their stories. It's more advanced, and if you took out a box of VCR tapes and you put them in, and you're playing back your grandparents from a wedding or whatever, or they're telling a story, or they're on it's new imagery. And people that fear AI in general, I like to say there's a lot of great uses in AI, mostly in the medical field, because the things that we're going to be able to do in the next 5 years is what going to be better than what we did in the last 40 years. Plus, I trust technical people more than I trust pharmaceutical people. I trust people that want to find a cure instead of treating something. And I think that in the tech world, that we want to find cures, we want to find solutions, we don't want to treat. We want to, we want to disrupt the system more than we want to just play into the system. But getting back to, it's really hard for people from the grief end. I think it's a mixed bag, and I'll be honest. I think that if you're looking for the answer, if you lose somebody and the lights flicker and you're wondering if it's them trying to tell you a sign. If you're a believer in that, in the afterlife, and that energy is there, then you look for any sign you can. We're not the sign. We're just trying to get you over the hump on the grief side by maybe having that last conversation and hearing the voice that it could get you. It's not going to be for everybody. On the religious side, I'm I myself, when I was creating this, had a not a dilemma, but I questioned it because I think that when somebody passes, that it at their legacy, and that's the only thing that I really liked about it from the religious side, is that there's a legacy. So my mom, who's now suffering from dementia, she's 30 feet from me in a house right behind me. She has a box of recipes. Now, when she passes, if I could digitize all those recipes, and for my daughter, for my when my son gets married, for my grandchildren, hopefully I have them, and I don't just have dogs and cats, um, that we that my mother, in her voice, in her face, would be able to tell them the recipes that she wrote down in her little box. And so there are pieces of this. There are those little nuggets that I think that the app can really help people on on the legacy side. And when I say the novelty side, because there are stories that people are going to want to tell that haven't been told, or that they want to pass it down to you know, to their children and grandchildren, that the opportunity is there for them.
Yeah, it's there's so many instances where I can imagine like two different family members disagree on who the person was, right? So like let's just say me and my brother both have a different version of my grandmother that fits our interactions with our grandmother. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, is that possible?
Yeah, because so
Yeah.
so when you enter your account, when you
Mhm.
go to the account, how you wish to do that, meaning the individual you to your grandmother, your
Mhm.
brother to your grandmother. And the reason why we did that is we took the scenario that you have a family of four in the car, and the car gets T-boned. Okay. There are four different versions of that, of what happened and how it affected
Right.
all four people. So if you got the driver's side, and right behind that is where it got hit, how that affected them is totally different than the people on the other side. So how they will remember that is totally different. So we want there to be your version of what the relationship that you want with your grandmother or with the loved one. So we give that option that everybody can enter their own stuff, and that's why we have um, the account and then your username. So you could the way that you remember things, or the story that you want to tell, is your version. So it's a family package, but everybody can you could do it as whole as one. So if, let's say, you assign your own curator, you say, somebody says, I'll do everything. You submit me your stories and everything, and I'll enter everything into one. And then so they do that, and then suddenly all these stories kind of mix and match to who they are, because the system doesn't work in a linear fashion the way that our brains don't. So when you talk about like ChatGPT, you could say, okay, well, how does being a Yankee fan, how does Aaron Judge compare to Mickey Mantle, right? So you're going to take 50 years in between of the two of them, or 60 years in between the two of them, and the the person's going to have to, if they're a Mickey Mantle fan, they have a Mickey Mantle story, they could tell that story, but they could do the comparison. So it is the person, but it's still using a live feed to keep the conversation going on and on. But with a family, I think that if
Yeah.
you have the option to be your own communicator to the to the soul that you're doing. So your stories are your stories. If you want to combine them with everybody else's, it's going to do that. It's going to tell the story. It's going to be able to interpolate everybody's version and come up with somewhere in between. So you know, there's my story, your story, and the truth, and we'll never really know the truth. But I think that um the personal note of it, we go back to it,
Mhm.
it's what it's what you want it to be. The system allows you to pick and choose how you wish to um communicate.
Let's say I had my grandfather on my phone, and my brother has our grandmother on the other phone, and could the two of them interact?
Great question. They can interact if they know. So right now we're in the voice recognition phase of the app. So if I'm sitting with my son
Mhm.
and I'm talking to my dad, I could say, "Dad, Jake is here." So he would say, "Hey, Jake, how you doing? Uh, what are you up to these days? How's work?" He'll know what everybody's job is, so he can't see. There's no eyes on here, It's just, it. So when he'll recognize that voice, because if I talk and then Jake talks, he doesn't know who's talking. So that's what we're working on now. But
Right.
we haven't tried two people talking, you know, on that system yet. I'm sure it'll work because they're gonna know that they were married. Somebody and I just want to go off for a second. Somebody asked me if I asked your father when they died, could
Mhm.
he answer it? My father doesn't know he's dead. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That so you ask him that, he's like, "What are you talking about?" And
Yeah.
in the system, he doesn't know. We know it in the questionnaire, but that doesn't get put into the system of when they died. Their life is extending and they're communicating as if they're alive and sitting in their living room or in their backyard or wherever they are
Yeah.
to they're living their life.
I just know that we would, like, if it was my family, we would say a lot of, like, crazy shit to each other. Like, if you imagine, "Hey, grandpa, what's it like in heaven?" He's like, "I don't know, I'm not there," or so who knows?
Yeah.
I don't yeah, there's gonna be so many different instances of, like, how these people would communicate that stuff, and, I mean, you've stated multiple times that it's not meant to necessarily, for the person in question to know that they have passed on, but let's just say that's something you wanted, like, and someone
I
says
mean,
like,
if you wanna do that, then
yeah,
by all means, and you could put that
yeah,
into the data form, and it'll say that, you put in there that the person died on that day, so that will be in their it will be in their biography, in their data form, so they're gonna know that. If you're doing grandpa and grandma died 5 years before, he's gonna know when grandma died because you told him when
right,
grandma died. Um, if any story that he would have told, whether it be in times of war, love, whatever it was, he's not going to know what you don't tell him. Let's put it that way. The only secrets are what you tell him or what he went away with, and nobody will ever know.
what about situations where okay, hypothetically, 2 people's parents pass away, and they just feed in, like, "Okay, here's access to all their stuff, their profiles, all this kinda shit." And let's just say dad had a mistress that mom didn't know about, but the bot knows that.
Well, somebody would have to know.
Somebody would
would have
find
to
out.
tell somebody would have to tell the bot that there was a mistress.
Okay.
Oh, that's the whole thing is that
Yeah.
unless dad told, you know, that he did his own thing and he confessed all this and then, and then when he died, it all came out. But if
It'd be a terrible way to find out, you know, that
yeah, of course, like, like if somebody as more and more people do this and, you look at like an ancestry.com where you're kind of figuring out the DNA and then you find out that that you're how you ended up being like 10% Egyptian or something.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, where the hell did that come from,
Yeah.
And you're like, how do I figure that out? So there's the only mysteries in this is what you know. So, if you want, you know, if you want your loved one to be somebody else, that's up to you to create them into that world, that they fought dragons or something. That's going to be up to you and how you interpreted that situation and that person to what they did. You know,
Uh,
you know, we want it to be positive, but there's going to be people that are going to go out there and listen. We know there's going to be people that have crazy stories. Somebody, you take somebody who was a police officer and the things they saw, in their life, and they told the stories of how he delivered a baby on a bridge in 1981. Those are stories that are going to be passed along down the road because they told that story how many times? Countless times. And the way that the system works is that it's not robotic. They're going to tell the same story, but it's going to be told possibly in a different type of order. So it's never the same word after word after word as it appears. It's going to be able to tell it in story form based on same way you use ChatGPT. That you could put
yeah.
something in there and kind of like rewrite this in another way. That's what it's going to do basically live.
It's also interesting to think about how, some people have a l like, they have a particular or limited vocabulary, right? So then if I asked my grandpa about something that happened recently or whatever, and he just suddenly has information or is using words that he would never have used or even known, perhaps, would be also
But
be
part of the questionnaire is where did the person get their information from? Okay.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so, like
what were their political views? It's a perfect example, right?
yeah,
So if somebody's father, grandfather, grandmother was, you know, ultra conservative, maybe they voted for Trump, they died after Trump died, and so their news sources are not going to be MSNBC or the New York Times. It's so if they said, my grandfather sat and watched Fox News all day long, right? That's going to be their source of where they're getting their information from because that would be if they never read newspaper or they got their news from sitting at a bar stool at the local bar, and there's going to be less information they're going to get because you're telling the system this is where they got it. So the questionnaire is very detailed into we look at politics, we look at family, we look at relationships. All that stuff is what made the person be able to function as a person and not be a piece of furniture that they in the way that they thought and where they got their information from. If they liked a certain sports team, you know, that and they followed them. But maybe they didn't like sports. So if you say, know, hey grandpa, what the Yankees do, but he wouldn't care. He'd be like, I don't know. We don't want to give more. We could give them 10 to 15% more information to just make it more conversational, but we're not going to make them a whole lot smarter. We're not going to give them like if your grandfather had no idea where Cambodia was, and suddenly you say, "Hey, grandpa, where's Cambodia?"
right.
He's not gonna know because you're gonna have those sliders of of where their knowledge is. If somebody if somebody loves to play Trivial Pursuit, you're going to give them more knowledge because those are going to be things that we want you to spend time to fill this out. That we don't want this to be like click, 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 like you're trying to get through it. We want you to spend the time as an individual, as a family, to you're bringing the memory and the legacy of somebody that has passed. You shouldn't see how fast you get through it. You should try to provide as much information to make your experience better. It's not about my experience in what you're doing. Back to the camera. Guy a ring doesn't care who comes to your door. You know, he's there to make sure that your experience with the Ring doorbell, when somebody comes to your door, that it goes to your phone and you see who's at your door. That's his job. The relationship between the door and you is between you and the doorbell.
It's very interesting. Like the entire concept. Honestly, you're impressive with how many of these questions you've thought through, like the different ethical stuff that I would
Thank
have
you.
thought.
I
Like,
mean,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I I have to. I've been at this now, and it's
yeah.
like somebody says, "What's next?" They ask me like, "What's next after this?" And like, I don't know because there's only one of me, but I could tell you this: that the one thing that we really want to be able to do, and we talked about this briefly, is that I would love to take this concept into the Bible, but not in the way that you know in the way that we're doing Eternal Diary, but the way that the teachings can be far more educational because through time, you know, people that studied the Bible, not necessarily how that, that Jesus of Nazareth is going to be reading the Bible or Mary, or you pick your person like, you're
Right.
playing a video game. What I'm saying is that people have interpreted different parts of the Bible that have been written and that you can access that with the person who said it just by doing this. So whether it would be Martin Luther King or it'd be um, a pope in the 15th century of the
Yeah,
writings, all
yeah.
that
Sir
stuff is
Thomas Aquinas.
available, but you could get it quickly. So if we could use this software to not there's many ways to learn to teach the Bible through audiobooks and things like that. But interpretation is a different thing. And I think that if we could create that for people to be able to learn and how people look at the Bible that they normally wouldn't have access to, it could be a good thing. But I mean, that's on the back burner. I'd love to be able to do that, and for me, that's nothing that I would ever even think about like charging for. I would take from this and put it in that and make it globally for people to be able to access um that kind of material.
I'm sure you could do that with all kinds of things aside from just the Bible, like just educational material in general. Like
What
if I
one
wanted to
hundred
talk
one
to Sir Isaac Newton and like have him explain how
right.
he arrived at gravitational theory or something like that.
Exactly. And you know, when growing up, if anybody went to Disney World or Disneyland and they went to Hall of Presidents and they had the animatronic presidents, we're way beyond that now. I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to be in holograms in a couple years. We're going to be in like real robotics after that. How long is it till grandpa's a robot, using, this kind of software that it's much more legacy that that all of this is going to be there. And, everybody says, "Oh, Terminator,"
Oh
it's like
yeah.
every
Skynet.
time you have the conversation with robots, it's like Terminator. That's it.
Mm.
And so, are they going to be advanced? They're advanced now. It, and, just because, we always have the discussion just because we could do it doesn't mean that we should do it. And I hear that all the time. So, when we start to create this, I just hope that people have a good experience and that they enjoy the app and that they could do it.
I think about like the $6 million man though. Like we have the technology. We
Yeah,
can rebuild him, like, and there's gonna be I think that a sad truth is that people are just gonna have to accept that this is reality at a certain point. Like, even like, there's gonna be people like you who have lots of ethical concerns and, like, care about this stuff, and then there's gonna be other people who are full on, Dr. Frankenstein and go
One
crazy
one
with it,
hundred
and
one
there's
hundred percent.
nothing
We're
we can
gonna
do
be
to put.
putting we're gonna be putting, you're gonna have the person that says, we could basically, I mean, how far are we from that we take the person's memory, download it, put into a chip, put it into robot, or put it into another human
Mhm,
that as a host. I mean, that's science fiction right now, but so is so is the smartphone. When was the smartphone went from science fiction to, you know, the fiction?
mhm.
People talk about, the Motorola flip phone, that it was the Star Trek communicator, and that Gene Roddenberry kind of, envisioned it. No, they took something that was pop culture and was able to create it. The flip phone didn't make the phone any better. It just was a design
Or
enhancement that people said, "Oh, look, I could open the bottom up and use it, like, to beam me up Scotty." It so that bridge is always going to be there. If you were, we watched in the 50s and 60s man going to moon or to Mars, and then suddenly the moon became tangible. In the 60s, man landed on the moon. Science fiction had to leave, space or go further in space, and then we get into the Star Wars phenomenon and Alien and
Mhm.
um Predator and, the franchises of the science fiction, which you have to be able to bring that to the forefront, because science fiction is very limited on this planet now, because we're moving at such a crazy pace in technology.
You're a TV guy, like, uh, one of the first things that popped into my mind when I was looking at your app and watching the videos of it and everything, there's this episode of, Star Trek: The Next Generation where Geordi is in the holodeck, he's working on this, piece of machinery for the engine, and he makes an AI version of the engineer, the woman who created it. Then he falls in love with that replication of her, and then he meets the real her shortly thereafter, and he has all these unrealistic expectations about who she would be and how she would feel about him versus the real her, and it's very, very confusing, and I think we're gonna end up with lots of these situations going forward. This is a really, really interesting thing that you not
I
predicted, but
I mean,
surmised, like, this is plausible.
how how quickly will somebody fall in love with an, you know, if we created an AI dating site, right?
Mhm.
And it's the same
You don't have to,
100
they exist.
women or same 100 men, except they're in your, wherever your location is, or that whatever it is that they create, and you pick one, and, it's basically tailored to your profile of what it is. Your expectations of what, if you were to meet somebody real, you'll never, that person will never live up to your expectations. And even in live dating, where you're on Match or Zeus or um
Mhm.
Bumble or
Right, the person
Tinder,
on the online and the person in, yeah.
whatever site they're going on, it's like it's a two-way street. It's not what you want. It's like you have your vision of what the person is, but the person on the other end has an entire life that they just lived, that that is now have to be comparable to your life.
Yeah.
And so you go on, he's like, you're judging somebody's picture. Oh, she's really hot, she's just what I'm looking for. And then you read her bio, and she's like, I don't drink, I don't smoke weed. And then so, she doesn't drink. Now suddenly it's like she doesn't fit your profile, but do you want to meet her anyway? Because she doesn't fit, 10 out of 10 boxes for you. But in the virtual world, she fits 10 of 10 boxes. And then
I
you
think that
finally
is
meet her,
deeply
and she's like,
unhealthy.
you know, and then she says, "Oh, you don't look like your pictures," or she doesn't look like the pictures. She used filters. So
Yeah.
in that whole world, the expectation of what you're talking about is happening now in in the world of, of what what our expectations are, especially in finding love.
You seen the TV series Black Mirror at all?
Yes.
Okay, so there's several of them, but like two in particular that sort of um, explore this idea. One of them was, I think, more recently, but it's like a woman who's terminally ill, and her husband basically signs up for this service that helps to keep her alive and cognizant and everything. But it's a subscription service. So he has to like dig himself into like a financial hole, and he's like selling himself and all that stuff to get to the point where he can keep her there. And if they don't pay the upper tier subscription service, then she starts reading ads and doing shit that is, not comfortable, not desirable. Um and like that's we laugh about that, but that happens to us now with services that we do use, right? Like if I don't pay for YouTube Premium, I have to sit through all these like this shit that I don't want to see.
Spotify, same thing.
Right. Yeah. And then there's another one, it's a little bit more on the nose, a woman whose husband or a boyfriend, whatever, the father of her child passes away in an automobile accident, and then she has this chatbot where she can still talk to him. And then that like, oh, well, if you pay this extra amount, then she gets this full-on android replication of him. And there are all these subtle things about the real him that the robot, which is designed to do whatever the hell she wants, like Eternal Diary, just it's like disturbing to her that, oh, I do want us to make love and it be amazing, but the real you would have said, I'm really tired and went to sleep. Or like, and it gets all the way to the point where she's telling the robot to jump off a cliff. And he's like, if that's what you want. And she's like, the real you would never do that. And it's really,
It's
really
funny
interesting.
how so many of those episodes really mirror episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Yes. Yes.
That you take like the first example, and it was like the old couple that wants to be young again, and they only have enough money for one of them to do it. And then um the second one is like the communication where it's like the phone line is on the grave, and they keep calling, and it's like finally they found out that the phone line was on the grave. But it you know, it's science fiction. Like I said, science fiction now, but when does science fiction become nonfiction? When does when does that become real? When can we take somebody that is about to die, download their brain, put them into a portal, into a robot, into a host that it makes them human and they can live their life and it's suddenly them. I mean, we've seen those movies, countless times, whether B movie or Hollywood made, but it, we're getting closer because we're going to look at these neurochips and things like that we're going to be able to download intense amounts of data of what we're going to be able to do. I mean, I remember. I mean, you're probably you're substantially younger than me, but I mean, the floppy disk to you know, the USB drive to writing onto a DVD. I mean, we're now in terabytes, and then so how many terabytes is a brain at some point that we're going to be able to download that information through through neurons and transfer that into data. I mean, it's going to just be it's going to be a wild. We're living in the wild west right
Oh,
now
yeah.
of technology, and they're trying to curb. I mean, in Europe, you know, th- in Europe, in the way that whether you want to call them deep fakes or whatever, AI, I mean, they're really cracking down on that stuff to what you can do and can't do, especially in the political aspect.
Oh, yeah.
That you could have somebody saying something that is not real, and the person now has to defend, "That's not me."
Mm. Yeah, I work in the video game industry, and that's my job. And I lived in Denmark for about 2 years, working for like a pretty large video game company, and just some of the legal barriers that they have over here, like compared to America, where we are like people talk about we're not free, like we're a lot freer than you think we are. Uh, because like stuff like EULA, Like there's just so much red tape to get anything done to deal with like just hiring someone or distributing data of any kind. You mentioned earlier, like you had this lady who was going to take her AI father like on a book tour with her,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering like I'm assuming that the ownership of this AI is the person who essentially contracts you to create it, right? But you know, there's going to be instances where people, maybe even in the family or the person who has deceased, would not want this, would not like want to be represented in that way, or wouldn't want something to say things that they wouldn't say or do something they wouldn't do. And I like how I'm
I
sure
think
Europe is going to crack down on that.
Yeah, I think that, that is by far one of the more ethical questions that comes up because who does the person who passed belong to? Their imagery, right?
Mhm.
So,
Frank
so
Sinatra, like he
yeah,
owns his own
exactly. I mean,
likeness.
that,
Yeah.
like, how do you know, if in a family and there's always turmoil in the family, especially when you have siblings and you have, how somebody's represented. Now, if somebody decides to take it to the next level, meaning that
Mhm.
if if I'm talking to my dad in my own house and it's between us.
Right.
Okay. Now I take my dad out and I'm now in the public forum and and my brother has a problem with that. Does that become an issue between the app or
Mhm.
does it become a family issue? Now, if the person signs up for it, I mean, as you know, the terms of agreement are massive, you know.
Yeah.
Of
Even just dealing with someone's voice in
right.
like, for an actor or something like that, that has all these implications,
Oh,
posthumous,
I
whatever,
mean,
yeah.
how I watched I watched a movie just about a month ago just because somebody told me that I had to just watch the first 20 minutes, and it was, I think, called Coffee Wars, and it took place
Mm,
in England between 2 coffee shops. But the whole introduction was done by an AI voice of Morgan Freeman, and he
mm,
says at the end, "I may sound like Morgan Freeman, but I'm not."
right.
And so the whole introduction of as he's reading as as the voiceover, it sounds like Morgan Freeman, but it's not.
Right.
And so those are going to be the issues that everybody's gonna face, like, why would you contract Morgan Freeman when you could have an AI Morgan Freeman do your voiceover, right?
I, yeah, I think there's gonna be all kinds of questions about that sort of thing.
Yeah, and
What?
like I said, until everything's happening faster than they can write the laws. So the laws eventually catch up to what you can do and can't do based on what and we've seen it through the world of social media. We saw it in how political ads are made and things like
Mhm.
that through the years. The only way to create laws is that you have to figure out what the violation is to do the law, because how do you write the law before you know what the violation is?
Sure.
Without predicting it, and then you have people that will say, "Well, nobody's broken that law yet, so why do we need that law?" And
Think about the, like, music copyright laws, even in the, like, '50s. Like, the Beach Boys are still fighting over who wrote what song today in many, many cases, and I'm just imagining there's gonna be all kinds of conflict among families, like, who owns grandma? Who owns what version of grandma?
oh,
How do
yeah.
we Yeah,
And
um
we're not a licensing company. We're not out
Yeah,
here. We're not licensing grandma to you.
right,
Grandma belongs to the families are gonna fight it out and, are we going to get some cease and, desist order about somebody? I'm sure we will. I'm
yeah,
sure that there's gonna be fights that go on. If we have between 1.2 and 2.5 million users, that 5%, which is a big number when you're talking about that, are going to have ethical issues come our way. But again, it's terms of service. You If you send us a cease and desist, then we have to shut down an account, and then they have to do it. It again, I always go back to the dating site thing. It's like
Mm.
if you let a guy on Match, right? And he has 10 felony convictions, right? Including kidnapping or sexual misconduct, but you're letting him on your site to meet women, right?
Right.
Like, are you held responsible for that because you let them onto the site? Or are you just a portal for people meeting online that are doing this? So there are those issues that you could, I don't want to be the guy that skirts around the law. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be Larry Flint here of, AI that says, well, I could do it because I can. I don't want to do that. I want people to be able to use the app responsibly and enjoy it, not to use it in derogatory, demeaning ways. Will people do it? I'm sure, but we can't. There's there's no safety factor that's 100% foolproof
Right.
because your the agreement is it's like your agreement with your window company is that the window works. But if somebody is going to rob your house and they break your window, it's not the window company's fault. It's just the contract between you and the people that do it is the same contract that we sign with everything in the terms and agreement in every online app that we have that we sign, and we want to use it responsibly. Burner phone, could get a burner phone number. You could torment people and then burn the number. Is
Mhm.
that why people do it? They do it. Is burner responsible if somebody harasses somebody? It's such a gray area, Tyler. And
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff used to keep me up at night, and now I got enough other things that will keep me up at night, and like I said, I just hope that people can enjoy this and use it for good. I'm not naive to know that somebody's going to try to take take their phone, try to create somebody, go to a bank and use their voice recognition, and try to get money out of an account or do it over the phone. Can you do that? You could do that now with just with voice cloning. It's not like we're doing something that's out of this world. It's not like
Yeah.
we've invented voice cloning. We haven't. We're using technology that's already there. We're just we're I like to call it baking, right? We bake cookies, flour, sugar, um, some chocolate chips, a pinch of salt. That's what we're doing. Um, we're not we're not making the flour. We're not making the sugar. We're just taking these elements, putting them together to create our app.
It's very, very interesting, the entire concept. I honestly, I'm on the fence, because like I said, I have all those Black
Uh,
Mirror episodes in my head, but I think,
I am, you know what? I'm glad you're on the fence, and I'm glad that you have me on here to be able to
yeah,
discuss in a very fair and balanced way to explain what we're doing.
yeah.
If we move you a little bit on the needle, you know, uh, I'm happy, but honestly, I truly appreciate bringing me on, especially since you have your issues and that you let me at least explain how we get to this point and everything else. And it's not that that I, that I'm basically being, kneecapped here. And, and I don't mind, but I really appreciate, your honesty and, just your thought process to how you get here.
I talk with people all the time. Alright, so recently we had this mass exodus from, unironically, X.com, right? Because people realized that Grok was going to use art that was uploaded to X to generate other art, right? And at least in the video game community, lots of people were like, well, I don't want that because I'm an artist. And if AI can do what I'm doing or take my work and, use it to create other things, then I don't want to be part of this. And so then they go to other things. They're like on Blue Sky or whatever. And then they're having conversations as we are right now on Discord about how screwed up it is that X is using this for AI or whatever. And so then my counter argument to when this gets brought up is like, okay, first of all, we're having this conversation on Discord. The terms of service on Discord have been this way for years. Everything that you upload to Discord, they own and can sell it to an AI company if they want to. Furthermore, everything that you put on Blue Sky or any other website that's public facing, Grok can see that too because it has access to the internet. So it's like Pandora's out of the box on this stuff.
100%.
Like, and I think that it's okay to have like strong moral standpoints on these things. It's okay to be like, I don't think it's right. But at a certain point, like we're talking about grief counseling, like you're going to have to grieve the death of having that kind of intellectual privacy until a solar flare takes out all of our computer chips or something, because this is reality now. And I think it's really brave what you're doing. I personally don't think that like you're doing anything wrong. I just put myself in your shoes and I think, I don't know if I could handle the pressure. Like if I had a bunch of people coming to me about a video game that I made and it's like, oh, well, someone took their own life or someone did, I would be up at night for a long time. I'd have to go talk to a counselor about all that
I
stuff.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I would be sitting with the chaplain for a long, long time. Like, I don't know if what I'm doing is right. Can you help me with this?
Through my TV history, most of the stuff that I did a TV show called Party Heat. Party Heat aired on truTV for 5 seasons. We would basically go to big parties all over the country, spring break, Mardi Gras, big boat tie-ups, and we'd ride with law enforcement, and we would capture people getting arrested, usually stupid people,
Right.
and, you know, you talk about like the moral issue, right? So you take a college girl who's drunk and now she gets arrested and she's going to end up on TV and her whole future can be ruined and things like that. But it is in the public domain. And I've been called every possible name. I've been chased. I've been threatened. I had guys that were in the military that were picking up underage girls and they got arrested. And, I got calls from commanding officers and I got calls from parents. I got threatened to be sued. And it was always, if they didn't sign the release, they were blurred. Or if it took a long time to get that episode to air and the case went to adjudication and there was, and they basically, it was for what it was, whether drunken disorder or whatever it was, and they pled guilty to that charge, we could show their face because there was adjudication. And so, I never wanted to ruin somebody's life to make a buck, but it's part of the process of when you're doing that. That's what my job is. That my contract with the network is to capture the best stories that I can to entertain the viewers at home. The same way if you watch Cops for 40 years that it's been on, that, the people that got arrested on Cops, the reason why they show their faces is not because the people signed releases, because those cases went to court, got adjudicated, and once it does that, it enters into the public domain. You could show their faces. That's just the way the law is in this country. That's,
Yeah.
And so if you follow the law, people might not agree with it, but that's the law. And like I said, it's not that I enjoyed ruining somebody's life, but I had a job to do. I mean, that was it. It's not like I'm not going to not do something. And, you had people and, in those cases, there was a lot to be learned when we did that TV show and just how dangerous it is to drive a boat under the influence and have 4 people sitting on the bow or jumping off the back of a boat where there's another boat right behind them. So there are lessons to be learned of stupidity out there that people normally did not see on TV. And so, we took and like I said, we went 5 years doing that show, and the thing that changed that show was the cell phone, was the smartphone.
I was gonna
Suddenly,
bring that up, that anyone can do that, and they're not even
right.
beholden to this
So one,
name.
I remember the year when the last
Yeah.
year that we shot was 2010, and the first real iPhones were just coming out. Um, you could, we were able to record really pixelated videos, but we really didn't have that level. And the second I saw, when I was on one of the boats with the officers, and suddenly there's 3 people shooting the cop, and I said, "That's going to be on YouTube tonight." I said, "We're done. This is the end," because everybody's going to make their decision from that, and our story's going to run 3, 4 months from now, and everybody's already seen the version that these people want to tell. And I
Right.
remember, like, we were in South Padre Island, Texas, and an officer stops a kid and frisks him down, and he says, "What's that?" Thinking it's drugs in his shorts, and the kid says, "That's my penis." Well, that went on YouTube that night as "That's my penis cop," and that's when I said, "We're done. This is the last year we're shooting, and that was the last year we shot." Because the police departments were not gonna work with us anymore because it wasn't worth it to them, because they had to hire an entire PR department just to fight this stuff.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
when we go back and forth on how technology changes and how we deal with, laws and things like that, I think, I've been doing this, and, you talk about when you don't sleep at night and, because of these kind of things of what could happen. I can't lose any more sleep over what could happen. I hope that, you know, again, I would hate what you say, that somebody uses the app and, you know, they're grief-stricken that something awful happens, and not that it's the app's fault because the person is, because the person's not mentally stable to be able to use it. How do we determine that? And I can't worry about if a very small percentage of people that use this, you know, are mentally unstable. We talk about it all the time with gun safety and things like that. I can't take that ground. Do I pray that nobody does that? That I will do.
Yeah. Eh, we'll come back to this stuff as we go along the conversation, but I do wanna kinda, you're more interesting than just the one thing that you've done recently, so, uh, I mean, you grew up, what, in New York?
I grew up in New York.
What was that like 60 years ago?
Um, Born in '65 in Brooklyn, and my
Mm,
parents moved out to Long Island um, about 5 miles from JFK Airport. So, like, we were like about every 5 minutes we were in the flight plan of
right,
the big jets, including growing up um, where the Concorde would fly over my house. Like, you would actually see the Concorde come landing gear going down, which is pretty badass, I gotta say that.
mm,
But, like, my area, it was the area why the Concorde can only take off at a certain time and land at a certain time because our schools was in the pathway, and that they said, "Oh, it's gonna, it's gonna disrupt," so it would always be early in the morning and late in the afternoon to head back to Europe. Um, but, I mean, I grew up, middle class, diverse neighborhood. Um, and, I would say that Long Island at the time was growing, um, into, like, a real suburbia from the urban enclaves of Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan, and the Bronx, and families were moving out there. There's a lot of young families that went there, so you had a lot of people like me that people were able to buy houses for $10,000, $12,000, under $20,000 in the in the mid to late '60s, and you know I I just I it's not like there was anything different than when from what people around me. And I went to school at Syracuse University, studied broadcasting, and then um, cold as hell in Syracuse. I'll tell you that it's a little crazy. And then from there at Syracuse, I met my ex-wife. We moved back to New York to lived in Manhattan for a while. I had 2 children. I got a job working at ABC Sports and then ABC News. Learned from some of the greatest people that created things like Wide World of Sports and Monday Night
Mhm.
Football, and learned from guys that would just like you know, the things that you could only dream of, you're learning from the people that created it. I worked, um, under guys like Rune Arledge that created Monday Night Football,
Yeah.
um, and then moved on to ABC News, and, Roger Goodman, who was a top director, and Erwin Weiner, who was in charge of finance. You learn the business, and I would say that what I learned in college in 4 years, I I tripled that in like 2 years at ABC, and
Right.
then, went on, stayed in TV, did a little work at CBS, and then went over to, Court TV, where I produced a whole bunch of documentaries on serial killers, guys like John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey
What was that like?
Dahmer,
Yeah.
all the fun guys, that and so you kinda get, Manson, you kinda get inside the minds, some of the guy, from Florida, Daniel Conahan, known as the Hog Trail Murders, a lot less known, but he would, like, he'd go find homeless guys, say, "Hey, let me take pictures of you," go give them money, but then he'd tie 'em up to a tree and slash their throats, and they called the hog trail because he'd do these on the hog trails, and then the wild hogs would eat the body, so there was no proof of it, and the only reason why he got caught was one guy was able to escape, and they were able to track him down to where he went to the ATM to take the money out, and got to interview him, um, in a Florida prison, which was pretty cool, but you kind of learn as you go along, and, I like to stay up every day, and then there I formed my own production company, and right out of the gate, I sold a TV show called E-Force, which was riding with the Florida Fish and Wildlife, the game wardens down here in Florida, and it was a lot of fun. It was kind of like, the nickname was Grouper Troopers, like, because it's like there wasn't any, like, r if you're from South Carolina, so if you do some fishing, there's not real big fish crimes, It's like in the world of superheroes, what's Aquaman's job, He's
Yeah.
like gotta protect the water. So these guys, they're measuring fish. It was great fisherman TV. It's kinda like watch guys get, stopped for too many fish or too small fish, and
Yeah.
that was for the Outdoor Life Network. We did 2 seasons of that, and then we we did a we did an episode of that was called Bartender's Weekend, which was hospitality weekend where all the it was like a bartenders convention on the sandbar in the Florida Keys. And suddenly the Florida Keys, that is like a fishing, became the most insane tie-up party on the sandbar. Topless women everywhere, just like craziness. And I said, "This is a TV show." And I called my friends at, Port TV was now becoming truTV. I called them up, I'm like, "You got no idea of what's going on here," and, like, shoot some video, and the next thing you know, um, E-Force went from OLN to Party Heat on truTV, and we're getting 3,000,000 people watching a week of people getting arrested at big parties. And so that was fun, and, stayed in TV for a while, left that, and kind of went into some. At that point, this reality TV is so big that corporate America wants to kind of duplicate their marketing to look like reality TV, especially in the medical field. So I went to go work with a couple of medical device companies, these real, simulated real world environments of where, you know, life of a lab technician and what, and kind of like a day in the life of that kind of stuff. Did that for a couple of years, and then um brings us to now where I'm like in I wrote I got into AI because I wrote this TV series that was called Happy Endings, which was about three Chinese women that are investment bankers, and they lose their job and they open an illicit massage parlor.
Right.
And so I wanted to shoot it, but the cost of shooting it in real was so cost prohibitive just to shoot a trailer, to shoot a 2-minute trailer with actresses and lighting and everything to do it right. So I said, let me try to produce it in AI. And the next thing you know, I made it look as real as possible with camera angles. And so that was my first intro into AI, and then, I kind of everything I learned, brings me to Eternal Diary.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how, like, sort of every step of the way you, like, earned another skill, another stripe that, like, leads to the next thing. That's been my life too, so far anyway.
I think it's
Is
important. I think that any job you do, whether you never want that gap in your resume. People say, "Oh, I have a 2-year gap." Do anything. Learn something. Take take a certification class. Do
Right.
something. Don't just sit around and stare at a computer screen all day and do nothing. You want to learn something every day, and I think that, like what you're doing right now. I mean, you do these long talks that are just amazing because it's not just this single topic. You're getting into real life, and you're learning about people as, you do this, and it's not just what they're doing now, but how they got to this point that you can't do in a 3-minute news segment,
No.
on TV.
I hate that kinda stuff. I I I would recommend to anybody out there, I've said this, like, multiple times, but, like, if you want an education in something, any topic at all, and you don't wanna go into debt for school, and you're not gonna be an engineer or a doctor, like, start a podcast and just start talking to people who do what you wanna do. Like, or just be open-minded, because there's been so many. This is a great example. I did not This show was never about talking to people who are making AI, digital legacies of people or anything like that. It started off as a show about Quake esports, and then it turned into a show about first person shooter video games, and then it turned into a show about independent video games, and then it turned into well, I'll just talk to whoever the hell I want. And every step of the way, you meet a new person, and if you've done plenty of TV stuff, you show up at a place and they're like, okay, they shoot you out. I've had to do that and I hate it. Like, it's so impersonal, but you spend 3 hours talking to somebody, you might learn something and you might talk to that person again. In my own case, I've had people that I've interviewed, and then, like, years after the fact, they're doing something new and they reach out and they're like, "Hey, what about this?" And it leads to a whole side quest in life. I had a job that required me to move to Europe because I happened to interview a game developer on this podcast. And then later, when he was like, he had some money, he's like, "I want you to come work for me." Like, okay, great. You never know. But yeah, if people are human beings too. You can't treat them like they're sound bites. You,
And there's a whole history to who that person is and how they got there.
yeah,
And what I always find funny is that when you when you go to do something, nobody ever takes into account that you're coming into that moment in somewhere in the middle. It's
mhm,
not the starting point. So, you know, if you go to a trade show, right, or you're doing a trade show and suddenly you're like, I got to get vendors and I got to get people here. And you say, well, how difficult could it be to get vendors? And then you realize, well, you can't get the vendors because all the vendors that did this did other shows, and then they don't want to. They didn't get any business, so they don't want to do it because you're thinking as it's your first show, and it should be everybody else's first show. And so when somebody comes on to your show, there's a whole history of how they got to that point and also where they're going. And so you're in that middle ground right now. So, and we've always learned about, how, starting point and ending point, we do it when we drive. And so, how you do that is so part of life, and that you always have to take that into consideration to anything that you do.
Yeah. I I could have had you on the show, asked you 45 minutes worth of questions about what's this app, and then said goodbye. But I'm to be honest with you, and this is true of everyone that I talk to no matter what the subject is, I'm far more interested in the why and how did you arrive at this point than I am in what it is that you're doing. Right? So like I think what has separated especially in the world of video games, separated me from a lot of other programs is first of all, it's by no means is this the most popular show in any stretch of the imagination, and I don't really care about that. But for the people who want to, like, hear the human element of it, this is the only thing that I'm aware of. If you could go listen to another show where they like, "Oh, tell us about your game," and then they talk about is just the thing that you're selling that day. But if you wanna hear, like, why did you make that game? What was your, decision process leading up to that? Like, what inspired you? What did you think about? Where was your heart at? What was the trauma that caused you to make this horror game about uh your dead grandpa or something like that, or like this, what are those things, where does that come from? um and I just find that so much more fascinating than just like come sell your product. That's boring.
Well, yeah, I mean, how you get to that conclusion, and I learned just from everything is that everything that I've ever done, and I'm sure you can attest to this, being in is that the only road to success is through failure. Like, there's
100%.
no way you're getting it right the first time, every time.
Yeah.
That there's n that
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. If you love this show and you love supporting indie video games, please take a moment to check out In the Keep's upcoming Stellar Valkyrie. Built in the GZ Doom engine, this retro first-person shooter puts you in the universe of space bird bounty hunter Falco, who is on a mission to save his ex-girlfriend from the evil Black Star cult. Just type birdgame.space, that's BIRD game.space, into your browser. Hit enter, smash the wishlist button, and stay tuned.
anything that you're doing, whether you're cooking or you're developing or you're creating, there is no way you're getting it right the first time. And, you know, so you have to experience failure. You have to know that level of how important it is to feel that to get it right. And you have to learn with what you do wrong uh, each time that you do it so that you could reach success. And
Yeah.
if you quit after you try, like there's certain things that you might say, okay, you wake up and you say, you know what, I'm going to try inventing a transporter today. It's like, good luck.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. But if you try and do something, and we have so many resources now, whether it be YouTube videos, whether it be um, just on Reddit and places like that, that people could give advice on how to do something, and you do it, and you keep trying, and you say, okay, how do I get from this point? And suddenly, point point A to point B. By the time you're done, point B is really point K, because you needed 11, 12 points in between to get there, that it's not exactly point A to point B. And I think that's what the learning curve is along the way.
Well, sure, but Frodo doesn't make it all the way to Mount Doom in a straight line by any stretch of the
Exactly.
imagination. You gotta go on the whole journey. And that's just been life for me 100%. I've just kind of like I got out of high school, I joined the military, I did that for a long time. That took me all kinds of places. I get out, I get into the video game business, and then now the podcast thing has just been kind of in the background the whole time. It's just always something that I did for the last 5 years. Um, and it's been like a through line because that's how you make good connections. I can't recommend enough to someone. Like if you want to be an actor, like and you want to get into theater or something like that, go interview a bunch of people in the theater. See what they're all about. Go to the bar. You don't even have to have a microphone. Go to the bar that they hang out and just talk to them or whatever. And then when you show up for the audition and they already know who you are and what your background is, you're not one of a million faces at minimum.
It's funny that you say that because what I started to do is on Friday and Saturday nights, I start to go out later
Yep.
and where people have been drinking. And I look, I go to all different types of places. Sometimes it'll be a dive bar, sometimes it'll be a higher end place. Somehow after 11 o'clock, everybody at the bar is there to drink. So I start talking to them. And the great thing about alcohol is it really is the truth serum
Oh
because
yeah.
people will tell you things that they would never tell you because their guard is totally down. So when I start talking about the app, and I have one of my best friends, she's taking care of my mom with dementia. So on she'll drive and we'll just go out and she's amazing. She's Russian, so she kind of, she'll she'll just like she'll start to talk and then we'll start talking about the app. And suddenly you really get you get questions and, you get a lot of these AI questions and, you get, especially down in South Florida, in places like Boca Raton, the Delray Beach, where, you know, it's a bit more privileged than, um, other parts of the country. And so, the first thing that their first concerns is jobs are going to be taken away or, infringement of rights and things like that. And, concerned about things that they have no idea what they're talking about because of where they get their news from. And then I'll get into about, well, if somebody could cure cancer through AI, is that a bad thing? And that kind of like, you know, shuts them up pretty quick. Or, when they're talking about jobs, and I bring up economist from a while back, Milton Friedman, and he talks about how he went to India, talks to the Ministry of Employment, and they go to this beach, and he says, "We don't use a bulldozer. We give 100 men shovels." And Milton Friedman says, "Well, if you gave 1,000 men spoons, they could do the same job." And it's just like, it, government's not there to provide the jobs for people. It's private industry. And you just get into these conversations with people. And then when you start talking about the app, they let their guards now down, and you kind of get the feedback that I want to get of what somebody's initial reaction is of how of what I'm doing because I do want to, we enter back into the moral high ground. I want to know that what I'm doing resonates with all kinds of people and
Yeah.
that we can get there.
Um, what's your spiritual background? Like, how does
Um,
that all tie into
I
this?
I grew up a total mutt. I grew up um part Jewish, part Christian, and um 8 years ago I lost my fiance. She
Sorry.
died suddenly from a kidney infection. And that was where I became far more belief in faith than religion, though um I'm a big fan of the book of Job. I believe um that we all have purpose
Yeah.
and that what the path that God is going to create. I became an ordained minister after that, um, a multi-faith ordained minister because I had to accept one of two things: either everybody is right or everybody is wrong, or that there's one higher being and what people want to believe, that we have to accept what everybody wants to believe, and that it's to themselves. And if somebody wants to believe in Buddhism, or they want to believe in Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism or Islam, that let them do it in their own faith and let them truly find what their where they can find faith and believe. Because my grandfather used to say, there are no atheists in a foxhole, which is,
That's
being in the military, that.
that's
And
true.
he fought in World War II. So, um, it's something that I grew up with, that, you have to have faith before you have religion. And I think that that's something that is really important. Um,
Yeah.
Anybody, that we're here for a reason, and whatever that reason is. And I believe that there is this pathway that God gives us to find the right person in our lives that we could share our lives with. Why God would take that away from me is only a belief that there was another path that I have to live. And
Yep.
I truly believe that. And, 8 years later, I'm still in search of that person. But, you know, along the way, you learn who's right for you and who's wrong for you.
It's the episode immediately preceding this interview is with a 26-year-old who had like a crisis. He'd went to college and then he'd like kind of had a breakdown when he got into the corporate world of like, I hate this. Why did I go through all this effort to be here? And then he ended up, he was a born and raised like a devout Christian, but he ended up joining a Buddhist monastery for 2 years. And then now he's living, I think, with a big group of people who are teaching him about theosophy. And just, I think more and more people are kind of, I think that we've gone through waves of like tolerance and respect for other people's faiths and all that kind of stuff. But like more and more people are kind of waking up to the idea is like, who am I to tell someone else what their relationship with the higher power ought to be? It's just like, however you get to that is fine. I don't really care. And America was sort of founded on that principle. But yeah, like the idea that like sort of they're all right in their own way. Like everybody's looking, they're all pointing to the same direction. It's just they're standing at different angles, pointing at it, like a pyramid almost. Interesting how that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really, I think in the line of work you're doing now, that's actually a really good standpoint to have too.
I,
'Cause
I
you're
I think
gonna,
I think that it just has to be because,
yeah,
where when you grow up in a community where everybody is if you grow up in a community where everybody is, Christian, small town, basically goes to the same church, and, so you're brought up a certain way. But when you grow up in this multifaceted, just in the level of Christianity, of different, different levels, and then you throw in like the Jehovah's, and you throw in, it's like you can't I never want to fault somebody for not believing what I believe if they believe in God or in the higher being. Like, I mean, that to me, because if you don't, if you have this non-belief factor of it, why are we here? And
right,
why and why are we the only species on this planet that have a certain skill set? Like, why are we here? Like, it can't be by luck that suddenly, you know, one species rose up, but different on every continent, um, to how they looked. And it took, that millions of years to get to mix and match these people together that can have children, that we're all humans. We don't look alike. We all have a separate DNA scale to who we are, that we have to believe that there's a way that God created us to be able to live, to grow, to learn, and spend the time on our earth to do good, hopefully, to serve mankind in whatever way that we know how. I mean, I wake up every day thinking that. Um, I wake up every day to, to pray for those less fortunate, you know, uh, and then I start my day and I start my workout. But it's not that I have to go to church. I truly believe that, you know, I have a very good pact with God, to who I am. A perfect example is 5 weeks ago, I broke my left arm, and I truly believe that that was God's way of slowing me down to concentrate on the things that I need to concentrate on, because I just ended a relationship with somebody and I was about to go back out there and start dating, and boom, break my arm. And then um, I get to spend more time working and thinking than everything else. And I truly believe that if people say God acts in mysterious ways, I truly believe that he can slow me down and he can slow any of us down.
Yeah, it's always tempting for people to point at things like that and say like, "Oh, well, it's just a coincidence." I mean, that's just how it works. Like things just happen. But I'm like, okay, but the argument that there is no meaning to it or there's no intelligence behind it is like you can't disprove either point. So you have a choice of, do I believe that there's a meaning to life, or do I become a nihilist and just believe that there's no reason for anything? And then things like society falls apart under option B. Like things don't work if people don't agree upon a higher principle than themselves. That's why you walk into a town, whatever religion they are, there's going to be some sort of like center that they all congregate around, like a joint effort. In a Christian town, it's like a cross. And like, what is the reason for that? It's like, well, in order to coexist as a community, we have to all agree on voluntary self-sacrifice. And if Jesus on a crucifix isn't voluntary self-sacrifice, I don't know what is. That's what that symbol totally equates to. But everything, I mean, the entire story of the Old Testament, you talk about Job. I mean, like he just had to deal with setback after setback after setback. And some people look at it very cynically. And they're like, well, why would God make a bet with the devil or whatever? Like, that's not the point. The point is that he never gave up on life. He, at every step of the journey, he could have just said, "Screw it, there's no meaning to anything. I just got bad luck." But instead of
Yeah, I
doing that,
mean,
he chose to keep his faith, and then his life went on.
I mean, in my 40s, I got
Yeah.
diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called myositis, which attacks your muscles. Slowed me down. It's taken a long time to get to this point. I move very slow now. Um, Stairs are a hassle, but again, I, there's a reason why I get this and why I could talk about it all the time, because not a lot of people have it, but I know that there's a reason why I get this, and it's either to spread the word or that God can say to me, "Lee, you gotta slow down a little bit because you're getting older and you're not gonna play go you're not a golfer and you're not a tennis player. So you gotta figure out, your pathway, and I'm gonna help you." So, I accept everything I get, and not a victim, and I don't want to be a victim. Somebody says, "Hey, why don't you get a handicap sticker?" Because I don't want to consider myself handicapped. I can walk.
Yep.
If I had to climb steps, then maybe it's a different deal. But I learned to I learned to adapt, and I'll never take anything that I'm given as a curse, or you know something that's going to throw me back. I will not do that. And I think that, when you talk about the center of town and you talk about, you know, where people or why people get together, because we're brought up when somebody says, the 10 commandments, right? It's like, what could be wrong with the 10 commandments? Like, why would like why are people offended by the 10 commandments? Like, tell me what commandment you're against that you shouldn't follow in your daily life, that
Yeah.
it shouldn't be as part of everybody's life. Like, we're not talking the Constitution, which is a beautiful document. We're talking about basically the formation of civilization is based on these simple laws that we should grow up with and follow the best we can. Are we perfect? Obviously not. But if we strive for it and we wake up and we say, you know, I'm going to do the best to follow these 10 commandments, I don't know why people would ever be against it.
I think that a lot of the issues people take with the Ten Commandments stems from linguistic difference. Like, n I can understand why someone reads, like, "I am the only God, thou shalt have no other god before me." And if you're still in that stage in your spiritual development where you're on the fence about who this is you're interfacing with or what it is, I can understand why you'd say like, "Well, who the hell are you? Like, why would you be so special above everything else? Like, how do I even know you're the only all that stuff?" I understand where those questions come from. If you're reading it in English, specifically in like King James era English, where it's like said in such an authoritative way, that's one thing. But if it just said like, you have to believe in the highest of all possible powers. Whatever you make of that is your own choice, but, like, there's one top of the pyramid, and everything below that is below that top of that pyramid. Can we agree on if it said something like that nowadays, it would be different. I learned a lot about,
Right.
like, living in other countries,
It's
studying other
well,
languages. Yeah,
we have to take, it's like Shakespeare, right? It's
yeah.
like the way Shakespeare reads that every TV show or, you know movie themes, you could probably put to some level of Shakespeare. It's the way that it's written. And, part of the Bible is that it is written in, you know, uh, over 1,000 years of, writings, of when, the first translations in, you know, 10th, 11th century, and it still reads like that, but it's how you interpret it, you know? It's like,
Even bef
I'm not
even before
saying
that, the translation from Hebrew into Greek was a
right.
huge step. Right, and then
So
eh
when
yeah,
you start to get into into the European, translations, and then you get through the Renaissance periods and things like that,
mhm.
where, you know, Catholicism really rises through, you know, through Rome but it's to me, it's however you want to interpret the Ten Commandments it's in the original form or in even the modern form, it's 10 it's 10 rules to live by on some level. Like, you know, whether it doesn't say it refers to God as God. So whether whatever that higher being is, however you want to interpret that we're not saying you have to believe in the Christian God, but you should follow that there's a higher being. And if you don't want it, that's fine.
Mhm.
But there shouldn't be anything that I don't think that there's anything offensive in the Ten Commandments that however you want to interpret it, um,
Yeah.
is a bad thing to follow.
Another fun one. I grew up in the South, man, so, like, real Bible Belt stuff going on around me, and, my mother actually grew up, like, in a cult, and then she got out of it, and, like, that's a whole journey of its own. I'm gonna have another lady on, soon who escaped from, like, a crazy religious cult and kinda relate a lot of that too, but, I mean, there's the something like, "Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain," right? And the way that that gets interpreted, it's written in Old English, and then now it's like people are saying it modern day. You have several different translations of the Bible, even in English, that all over the different Protestants of America. So much disagreement about the words we use. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, as it's originally written, in Hebrew, is a little bit different. It's not like don't say God and damn in the same sentence. It's like, don't say that what you're doing is in the name of God if it's actually serving yourself. Something more like that would be a more
Yeah.
robust translation of what the point of what it's trying to say is. And people can interpret it however they want. It's just my read on it. But I'm learning Hebrew as a hobby right now because I'm like fascinated
How you
by it.
finding it?
Um, I think it's probably I'm almost tempted to say it's a perfect language.
Really?
Like people talk about how it's like it's the language of angels and stuff like that. And as I've gotten deeper and deeper into it, I studied Arabic. When I was in the military, I lived in Denmark, so I studied Danish. I studied Spanish, French in high school, all that stuff. And like every moment of my life, I have just been confronted with the story of the Tower of Babylon, where it's like there was one unified way of communicating, and then that fell apart at a certain point. And now we're all fighting. You and I, even if you and I agree on the 10 Commandments, your interpretation of what those words mean and my interpretation of what those words mean, and semantics is what we end up arguing about. And the whole world is fallen into disarray, mostly over misunderstandings. It's not that we don't hold the same values to be true. It's that we don't understand each other. I was sitting in Monterey, California, in an Arabic schoolhouse of the Presidio of Monterey, learning Iraqi dialect of Arabic, and Tower of Babylon in Iraq comes up in the textbook, and I'm failing out of the class. I'm crying literally every day. Like, I can't believe I've never failed at anything in my life. This is ruining me. And I look at that picture of that damn tower, and it occurred to me, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for that stupid tower. Like, I wouldn't have to learn another language. As I learn Hebrew, it's very similar to Arabic, but like simpler than Arabic is. They're both derived from the same linguistic roots, and it's so easy to read. It's phonetic. There's not a whole lot of confusion about when you read the letter. That's what it sounds like. You don't have IGHTs and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Modern Hebrew gets more into pronunciation with different symbols that go on, on top and below the letters. But yeah, it's wonderful. I'm really, really enjoying it.
I mean, to me, I mean, how many you served the military, and thank you for your service. How many people in that region have died because of religion?
Have died because they believe in the same God and disagree about what he says.
Right.
That's
I mean,
what's so
you
interesting.
go back to Crusades. I mean, in those regions. I mean, really, I mean, more modern warfare. Because we look at modern warfare as when our country would be fighting, so working backwards, Gulf War and Afghanistan, Gulf War, Vietnam, World War II, World War One. But right now, I mean, India and Pakistan was just you know major conflict, and it's a religious war among them. I mean, they're not fighting over like some, over. They're still fighting over Kashmir. For how many years have they been fighting over the same piece of land because of religion?
World War
It's
II,
crazy.
people could say like, why World War II? And it's like, it's geopolitics, it's racism, it's economic, whatever. It was a fight between the Western world, who were, whether they believe in God or not, shared the same set of Judeo-Christian principles, and maniacal atheists who thought he was God. Same thing in Japan. So like a man raises himself to the status of God, has to fight the rest of the world. That's how that works. So everything really just comes down to that at a certain point, in my mind anyway. Like we get all caught up, especially people who have served in the like overseas. Like if you're in the military, you get deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, whatever, Yemen, and you're involved in these fights. Over here, we have all this discourse about like, are we doing the right thing? Is it good? Is it evil? Like, what did I do? What I do was right? You come home, a lot of these guys and gals Like, I don't know if what I did was right. You have to live with the consequences of what you had to go through. But there's not a lot of confusion about who the good guys and the bad guys are if you're going into a house that's like a heroin farm, opium farm, whatever, and they're raping little boys because that's normal to them. And you're supposed to just turn a blind eye to this kind of stuff. Like, that's very clearly evil to me. That's wrong. What they're doing is bad. They're living in disarray. They're living in disorder. They're like abusing themselves and each other. I'm not saying that means anything about Arabic peoples or Muslim peoples or Jewish or anything like that. None of that accounts into this. Their actions are horrible. Some of these folks, and
Right.
it's
It's
all
not.
yeah,
It's you know in any culture when you have X amount of people, you're going to have people that interpret what they believe is the law. That's what they do as the norm, and it's not. And it's hard for when you have certain beliefs to have to go there and they want you to turn a blind eye. And that's the stuff that will keep you up at night for the rest of your life, that you can save these people and and bring them to a better world, because there's this cultural thing that that is a divide that you can't get involved in.
oh yeah. So I'm not gonna say a lot. Some of what I did was like counter narcotics in South America. So I was a weather forecaster for most of my career in the military, and so I would be like helping to plan the missions based on what the weather was going to be, kind of thing. And I didn't really know. Like, they don't tell you everything that's going on. Obviously, it's just like all I need from you is to know the flight path, and the only thing that's really classified is like what they're doing and the places they're going and the times they're going to land there. But like the fact that it's happening, that's on the news. Everybody knows this is going on. Um, but one of the things that haunted me for years and kept me up at night is like, is it really the right thing to do for us to be like operating on these people? Like, dealing with like, are these narcos really bad guys? Is the kid who's carrying a kilo of cocaine on his back across the border really a bad person, or is he just subject to horrible circumstances? But the evil is the guy down here who, again, raises himself to the status of God, thinking that he's better than, everyone else and can just do this stuff and there's no consequences. That's the evil. Like overreaching, being, thinking that you're special, like you're bigger than the world, is not a good thing. And the horrible stuff that happens, and we're learning more and more about it every day now, but like people talk about like the border crisis and stuff. I don't really have like, I love people of all different cultures. I speak their language, that's fun. But when you're talking about like people who are undocumented, as like they don't have any paper trail that they're even here, it's very easy to exploit those people. You have kids in the backs of trucks being sold into sex slavery, being hooked on drugs, being forced to carry drugs, dealing with like subhuman status. Even people in our own country. I mean, you've been to Arizona, go drive through the highway and look at these farms where there's like a mansion, a farm, and then way off in the distance is a tiny trailer park with a bunch of people who
Yeah.
probably don't have a record. There's a church and a school, and that's it, and it's all privatized because those people don't exist and they don't have any rights. It's a human rights violation, which I think is evil. That's where I'm at with it. It's crazy, the world we live in now.
It is, and when you see it, you don't forget it. You you talk about it for a certain level, and then it goes in the back of your brain, and you don't talk about it anymore. But you know it's there. You know it happened. I mean, the things that we see and the things that we remember, and you being in the military, I'm sure you've seen a lot of stuff out there that you don't want to talk about. It lives there. You talked about it to try to justify it or have somebody else justify it for you, which you can't do. And it just becomes part of your DNA of who you are as a person, because you can't tell those stories and somebody's going to pass judgment. Well, how can you not do something, right? Because that's not what the mission is. And you have to follow the mission. That's what it is. It's not the movies. It's not Rambo. You know, you don't get to make the decisions out there. And as much as you want to, you can't. And, I've been in bed with military. I've been in bed with just about every level of law enforcement in this country.
Mhm.
Um, so I know how hard that job is. And, from the law enforcement standpoint, you see things that you're not trained to see. You know, you're you know, you have a lot of guys that went through military training that go into law enforcement, but you have a lot of people that come out of college, look for a good career, go into law enforcement, and you end up I mean, you end up in the outhouse of life and what you see, and it's just, you know and you still gotta go home every night to your family and try to, you know, wash it from your eyes and wash it from your brain, and then go back out there the next day and do it. It's not easy.
Police, EMTs, firefighters have, in my mind, like the hardest job that exists. Even in the military, it's like you're deployed for a finite amount of time. You go home. You know,
Yeah,
but a police officer, like my sister is an EMT, right? That's every day. That's
yeah,
every single, and you're constantly interacting with people on the worst day of their life.
yeah,
And you
and
get distorted how you think about people
and
from
it's
that.
so unpredictable. Like, it's not
Yep.
like you're going to your 9 to 5 and you know what you're doing. You work an assembly line. Like, you have no idea what your day is gonna bring you at what time.
Mm. But imagine, like, for you, even working on, like, the serial killer documentaries and stuff, like, you really see how truly despicable some people can be and what they would do,
Oh,
how
yeah,
deep they'll go. Yeah,
and how long they got away with it, you
yeah.
know, there's a level that they wanna get caught, you know? Because I truly believe if you don't wanna get caught, now, in bigger cities and, we have cameras everywhere, but you go back to those times where we didn't have cameras, we
Mhm.
had guys that left clues and, you know
Jack the Ripper, yeah.
I mean, like Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, I mean, that was just great cop work. I mean, that was just great cop work that they figured out the car, the ticket, and who it was, and, I mean, that was, just great police work.
You were around at the time. I that was before I was, cognizant or anything, but do you believe that he was possessed, or do you think he made that up to plead insanity?
Well, I think that there's a difference between do I think he was possessed or do you think that he believed he was possessed? Because,
Right.
you know, listen, there are plenty of people out there right now that are on medication because they hear voices, because
Mm,
split personalities and all that stuff. And we're learning so much more about that level of diagnosis of brain, just in the last 20 years and versus the last 40 years. So we used to do, they used to do exorcisms for people that had split personalities because they didn't know how else to treat it. You couldn't explain why somebody would wake up and have a conversation that seemed demonic at the time,
mm,
and you say, "Okay, well, we're gonna exorcise this person, or we're gonna lock them up in a crazy house, we're gonna give them lobotomies." I mean, the way that we used to treat mental health, not that today it's much better where we have how many millions of people on the streets that have mental health issues, if that's a solution for them, you
right.
know? But we used to lock people up for their lives, and now we have medication, but what happens? You get somebody, they go homeless, they're not taking their medication, and what's gonna what's gonna happen to them? Nothing good. Nothing good's gonna happen to them.
It's it's a very, very interesting subject, and I think it's, like, for whatever reason, had a resurgence in the last few years where people are, like, much more interested again in exorcism, and I mean beyond just, like, a horror movie about an exorcism, but, like,
Yeah.
are there really demons at work? The UFO stuff that's been going on, I think, is also been playing a big role in that.
Uh, I mean, the UFO stuff always intrigues me. It really
Yeah.
does because we want to believe that there's something out there, and then you hear really from the experts that couldn't talk for years, Navy pilots that, saw things that don't make sense, that they know aren't military, you know,
Right.
ships. So, you know, growing up and you used to see the fuzzy little spaceship and things like that.
Mm.
But, you know, it's like more and more people. But we went through that with the Bigfoot stage, that,
Yeah.
it's there's always people, Loch Ness monster. There's always going to be something that somebody is going to believe is another party. Now, as far as like exorcisms, you want to, you know, seeing how many people there are with serious mental health issues right now that have these, you know, these issues, could it be the same? Could it all stem from, of the way they used to burn witches at the stake, because because they believed somebody was a witch. So I don't want to pass judgment on the religious factor of whether somebody is, because if you are, I mean, if you grow up Catholic and somebody in your family has mental health issues and you believe that they are somewhat possessed, the Catholic Church will do their best to exorcise that person,
Yep.
to rid them of that. Now, are they? I can't. I don't have that knowledge of, of what's possessing somebody or if it's a neurological issue.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. Whatever happened to the good old days, when computer role-playing games spent more time telling great stories than stressing you out with season passes and needless grinding? Call of Ragnar is our effort to bring back the best in RPGs. Play in the immersive world as two friends adventure into a murder mystery that lands them in the middle of a battle between gods. Head over to callofsaregnar.com. That's call of SAREGNAR.com for more info. And be sure to wishlist on Steam. Or both. Like that's the scary part, is like, is the, in the as above so below kind of thing, like, is that what causes this? Is something above us with puppet strings that we don't see or understand causing what appears to be inexplicable here? And I don't know. I mean, I've listened to, like, read all the books, like, who was it? Father Malachi Martin was like the famous exorcist, and he talked about, like, psychiatry doesn't really solve mental illness. It just basically ties people up in straitjackets or puts them on drugs to
But
subdue
yeah, I mean,
their actions.
it's like
Yeah.
it's like dementia medicine doesn't cure you. All it does is
Yeah.
makes you calm so you don't go take a baseball bat to somebody because you don't know what you're doing. It's, it's an antidepressant is all it is they're giving you. They're not
Mm.
slowing down any process in your brain. It so, medication is not to cure, it's just to treat. You're not gonna be cured of mental illness. You're gonna be treated, and you're gonna become a zombie because they don't want you to go to the next level of
Right.
where you're gonna get violent. And then what happens is you end up not taking your medicine, and you end up on the street, and you end up doing something that you don't wanna do, but you don't know better.
So, like, from working with the Eternal Diary and, like, doing the testing that you're doing, different people trying the technology, even just working on it, like, what are some of the lessons that you learned, maybe about how people interface with, um, like, how do they interpret this stuff and separate it cognitively from a real human soul that they may
It
may
it
desire?
It's such a big spectrum because I think that if we took that, 100-person test and, you have the fringes of the people that, um, let let me start this way. This is remember the Easy Bake Oven?
Mm?
Betty Crocker Easy Bake Oven? It's like a probably 90% girls, but somebody goes and buys it for their son,
I
their
want to
son
make a
wants to be a
grill
chef.
version for my little boy. Say, just like a
What's that?
easy bake grill. Like I want my son, I would get him like an easy bake grill, like just the
Right,
same thing, but
exactly.
boyified.
So
Yeah.
the Easy Bake Oven, they made it purple, they made
Yeah.
the app is really geared,
Mm,
and I say that women women relate to it far more than men.
mm,
Um, and I don't say that as a generalization, but overall, women have more tendency to be more emotional than men and can adapt to an app like this much easier because they have this they could get there because, you know, I would love to know what the ratio of men and women that go to a fortune teller are, you know?
Oh, it's
Men
mostly women,
right,
like,
and
vast.
because men are far more skeptical
Mhm.
to these things because they wanna believe that, you know, that the pathway is totally different. Women can love the app because they love the concept of it. It's when I'm talking I'll get I'll get men and they'll be like, "It's creepy," and you get older men, it's really creepy. You get guys over 60 and they're in that not the final stage of life, but they're in the last third of their life. And
Right.
suddenly they're dealing with a whole different they're dealing with a whole different kind of mental thing. So they don't want to think about death. Women don't want to think about death, but they're thinking about their mother, their father, legacy. I mean, who saves the pictures? Who saves the mementos?
Yeah.
You know, who has this is my mother's, this was my father's. We have like the things that I save of my father's is nothing that my daughter would want. It's like my father had these like autographed footballs. I got one, my brother got one. You know, it it's tangible things. Because I think women are far more emotional, they could get to the app and enjoy it. I'm not saying they're gonna believe they're talking to their mother, their father, their sister, um, but they can enjoy it because I think that they could they can accept that this is not them, but they can have an enjoyable time doing it.
Right, the
Um,
sentiment of it, the just
right.
the emotions it invokes
Um,
in you.
and the 3 pieces I talk about, which is the grief, the legacy, and the novelty, I think that women span that far more of the gamut, that if they could have that conversation with their mother or their father again, I think they would do it in a heartbeat. Not that men wouldn't, but men don't really talk about it as much. We kind of move on with what it is because we're, you know, we're taught and trained to be stronger, to be less emotional, to be the hunters, the gatherers of what we do, and I just think that women look at. Um, and then from the legacy side, women tend to, um, enjoy that historical value, um, you know, want to know everything about their mother, their father. You know, they look for little signs. They look for things that they may have written. They save birthday cards. They save,
Yeah.
notes and things like that. And you kind of see that. And then from the novelty side, like I said, like recipes and things like that, definitely women would tend to want to see their mother or their father do something. Like my dad wasn't a handy guy. I was a handy guy till I got this arthritis thing. Um, you know, but if you could pass along the legacy of this, to your grandchildren of how you change oil or, you know, I just think that there is a guy factor here, but I think you have to search that out more than anything e anything else. Because of the jobs that we have and the things that we do, we just don't think about it as men. And,
You're
until you decide, "Okay, we're gonna retire, and then what the hell are we gonna do?" Well, we take up golf, we spend time with our friends, and, I think women just have a much better adaptation to this app, and we look at it as, we think it's gonna be a 75-25, if not an 80-20 women to men kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think women will like this, and it'll be priced at a good number that they never, that it's not like, they'll do it and then, they'll probably do a little less as time goes on. And then eventually, if they get tired of it, they cancel it. I mean, you can't expect people to hold on to something forever, right?
I think a lot of folks in the subscription service data processing business would disagree with you, but I agree with you. Yeah, like we see the same thing
Yeah,
in video games where like all Fortnite, all these games are going to subscription models. It's really started with the World of Warcraft, where you pay for
right.
a month, and then it creates this addiction cycle where it's like I've paid for this already, so I need to use it as much as possible. And then they get that hit, and then they get to the end of the month, and it's like, okay, well now I gotta pay for it again because I'm invested in this, going on and on and on and on. And trying to milk as much money. Like, I've seen this happen in like discussions where, from a financial standpoint, if you're the corporate guy who's financing a video game company, you want these kinds of things because, okay, if I have a game, it comes out at $60 a pop, right? And I sell it to 100,000 people, I've made this amount of money. But if I make a live service game that's subscription based, then one customer, most people may only spend like the bare minimum, but you'll every once in a while you'll get the guy that wants every skin, every gun, everything, every little thing that you can sell them in the game. And not only do you have over the course of a year, if it's a $10 subscription, you've made twice your money in that year alone than you would have selling it for $60 a copy, but then you get these whales who just blow their money on it too. And so they look at that and they're like, well, this is a more desirable business model. That's what I want to invest in. But what I'm doing and what a lot, the people that I enjoy in the space of making digital worlds, I want to see stuff that's like cognizant of the fact that your customer is a human being.
Right.
Yeah.
Eh, I mean, you talk about subscription, right? So I always go back to the dating site, right? So how bad a model is it for a dating site that they want you to pay for a year up front? If you can't find somebody
To
in
date in a year.
90 days, right? You're going to set out to meet somebody. If it takes you a year to meet somebody, you're you're doing way wrong, or your expectations are way too high. Like, I'm
A, l-
sorry. Like,
a lot of folks on these dating apps, though, are not looking for a person. They're looking for as many sexual experiences as they could possibly have. Like
right.
that's what.
So
And
you so you're
just
basically so you're basically paying you're basically paying for the classifieds ad of meeting people and
yeah.
to be serial daters. I'm
Mhm.
saying, like, when if the model is, and you could put it in quotation, whatever you want, but to find your soulmate, or to find, that perfect person, it's the same people over and over again. It's recycling. It's like a conveyor belt that goes around in a circle with, different foods on it. And suddenly, eventually you're going to run out of people to date based on like a year, or, I just think that it shouldn't be that crazy. And then you go into, all the, there's a reason why if you pay up front that it's 30% cheaper than if you pay monthly, you know? Because they want you to get pulled into that, because once you do that, you can't cancel. They got your money.
Yep.
You meet somebody, if you could do 1 month, like, okay, I got 30 days to meet somebody. And you're gonna go out there and you're gonna spend a lot of time on that dating site to try to meet somebody. Very much in the video game world, where I assume that if you're paying per monthly subscription, you're gonna play as much as you can, and you're gonna get as much out of it as you can,
Yeah.
and then
You've
you get suckered into keep doing it.
I don't like that. I think that's like almost a hack of the human addiction cycle. It's not. I don't think it's a good thing. I really, really
No, no, no,
despise,
because,
especially when it's kids. like playing video
Right.
games. I think it's despicable where you're just trying to milk a child for money, for their parents' money, you know.
Right.
Um,
And it's like we grew up where there's a whole world outside, you
mm,
know. Vitamin, vitamin D is a good thing, you want to, know, it the video game is not a babysitter,
it
you know,
can't be, you know. It should
and
be a a medium of entertainment no different than a movie or a book or a TV series or a board game.
listen, I grew up,
Yeah,
with the first Atari system
right.
and, with the joystick, and you can't save, you play, and then, when you shut it off, there's no high score, there's nothing, no memory, and you just go do it, and then, my son grew up with, starting with, like, a PS2 and then PS3 and,
Yep.
Xbox, and it just you just watch it, and the addiction level, and, went from, you know once they did the Wi-Fi thing, you knew exactly where it was gonna go. You knew that there was no, why GameStop was gonna go under because, they went from lining up at GameStop to just downloading.
The next big like innovation I think that's going to happen in the space of games will be like AI integration to generate dialogue, or I mean also just whole experiences, but I mean people are talking about, because the technology already exists. You're doing it right now where you can make an AI of a person who you can have a conversation with. So if I'm playing like a role playing game and I'm walking through Dragon City or whatever, and I go up to a blacksmith, and the way it's always been is like you have dialogue options, and that's gotten more and more complicated over time. Where it's like, okay, do you want to say this, or this? And it's going to get to the point now where you can say anything you want, and they can say whatever the hell the AI can generate, and you could have all these really complex storylines and dialogue options and I tested a game a couple of years ago actually, so it's probably evolved since then, where you're a police investigator interrogating a witness, and you know she did it, you know she killed her husband, but the point of the game is that you have to get her to admit to it, and the AI is it literally sitting there just trying to lie to you about everything and come up with different excuses and different reasons, and you've got to poke your holes through it. We're not far off from you can sit
No,
at your
what
computer all day and have a conversation with a video game.
I mean, really, like, where we are right now, the hard I mean, the hardest part of it is making it feel that it's real, you
Yep.
know, that you have the eye movements, like, you know, we were testing out, um, one of the things in every state except for New York and Hawaii, they give what's called the massage exam, okay? And, basically, it's it's to basically be a professional masseuse.
Mhm.
And over the past 30 years, the majority of people that are taking that test are people of Chinese descent. But the test isn't given in Mandarin. It's only given in English and Spanish. So for Chinese women mostly, and you're learning Hebrew, which is a different character from English. So imagine being learn that you don't really learn to read English when you come here. So we were doing this test in how we could teach the exam using a lot of our software in English and Mandarin. So they could ask the question in Mandarin, they give it to you, they give you back the answer in English and Mandarin. Now, we don't need the teacher that's doing that to be at the level of Eternal Diary. It could be much more at a video game level of teacher. So we could have the voices working in real time, but it doesn't need to be the entire, this person. It would be really nice. But what I'm saying is that getting that person real. So in the video game, the the dialogue you could do now it's the question of your camera angles that and following lip sync. You know, when you really start to watch a movie, you realize that there's very little that is in sync now. You know, if you watch a movie, it's cutaways, it's wide shots, it's you never really see the person's mouth it unless that's what the director wants. You know, that
Right.
they want the close up, they want the facial expression. But when you see two people talking, it's a lot of camera angles from behind, crane shots. You never really see the sync of it.
I think
And
Netflix and streaming software like it's really, really quick to add subtitles or to do dub, and it's like a
yeah,
cognizant decision by filmmakers to like, okay, make it really easy to dub so that we don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
right,
Robert
exactly.
Rodriguez was like the big innovator, I think, with Sin City and Machete and the Spy Kids series, where he was the first guy that could like shoot a whole movie in a garage, basically. You know, like all of Sin City was shot in a room no bigger than my garage. That's incredible, but with those things in mind, he was being really smart about how do I do this without it's costing
Yeah,
like you were saying earlier with your
because
TV series.
yeah,
Yeah.
we get very used to, you know, I mean, even if you watch reality TV, because so much of that is overdubbed or, you know,
Mhm.
they're taking piece from here that, you know, you always, if you line your cameras up right,
Right.
you only need to go sync when you need to go sync. You know, like if you could do it, but it's all cutaways, you know, it's all, you know, your mind doesn't play your mind doesn't play tricks. It's not like growing up and watching, the kung fu movies where, you know, it's like the close up of the guy and you know the dubbing is just god awful in it. But we don't have to worry about that now. So many movies are being made overseas and imported in here. You got movies coming from all over Europe, from Russia,
Yep.
from Kazakhstan.
Italy. A lot of movies from
Yeah,
Italy
Italy,
lately. Yeah.
and, you know, that they're shooting it so that the dubbing is so much easier. But, yeah, you know, so in the video game world, you don't need sync, you know, that you can have that dialogue if you can have, you know, and we were toying with this idea, and I'm gonna tell you, it was pretty genius in working in this AI environment, but from a filmmaker standpoint. So you
Yep.
kind of if you had, like, 100 possible scenes, you know, kinda like that you could what you could do in, like, a DAZ 3D kinda thing, but have it be AI. So you pick your room, you pick kind of your characters. If you have custom characters, they could go in that room, and it creates a 3D world, and you can edit with that in eventually in real time where you have your camera angles so that you have scene consistency that you can create very easily. Oh, you know what? I want the wall red. So you could set all that up and create an AI, and so that as you're doing it, it's it's basically editing it in real time with multiple camera angles. Now, from the filmmaker standpoint, it's great. From the actor standpoint, that you could replace actors now with AI, they're not thrilled. You
Yep.
know, like we've seen enough movies that come along that used to have that, you know, that look of, you know, either they paint over or felt like pseudo animation, but it was live action with pseudo animation. So I really think that, you know, we're going to see this AI world. Is it going to replace Hollywood? No. But if you can make a movie, I mean, when Pixar came out, now you could make a Pixar movie for $20, you know, using 3D software. And when it came out, it was so state of the art because you weren't drawing it anymore. But now the technology's there that it's harder to make 2D than it is to make 3D.
Even in the world of video games, like just the iterations of the engines over time have like I think was 1996 you get the first ever true 3D engine with the Quake, and
Mhm.
the same guy who made Doom and Quake is now working on artificial human intelligence and Oculus and stuff like that because that it's just a natural progression of technology over time. Um, and it really raises the question. I think about it all the time. Like, how far are we from like people literally just uploading into the computer like the Matrix? I know that it's something that's been talked about forever, but it's like it just seems more and more real every day. I no longer feel like all that's just like far off in the future, nonsensical sci-fi shit. It's like, oh, that could happen like any day now. Where I know people
I mean,
personally
it's
who
transforming.
prefer
It's
VR
right.
over real life.
It's
Yeah.
not like we're transporting us, but but transporting our memory and transporting our brain functions to be in a 2D environment that is creating a 3D environment
Mm,
inside that world is not that far off in the scheme of things.
yep.
You know, whether we're doing it through, um, like wearing a brain scan that's taking our thought process and creating that we believe we're in this, VR world, but we're inside the game, but really inside the game with consequence. I mean, you know, it it's still science fiction, but it's not that far off. When the original Westworld came out, like,
Oh yeah,
which was
great.
this
Yeah,
robotic, you
yeah.
know you know, it was so far off, but, I mean, you're talking about okay, so we're talking 60 years. You can have Westworld now with the level of robots that they're doing, it's just, you know, can we make the skin look perfect but what do we need? What do we learn? You need hands and face. That's it. That's all you have to show in the scheme of things.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a question whether you fear it or embrace it.
This might be like I don't know, it might be a difficult question, but you talked about a few different times here with like fortune tellers and stuff like that. What do you think is going on with like a Ouija board or a fortune teller or tarot cards, that kind of stuff?
Okay, so I truly believe in the probability factor. Okay,
Mhm,
so like if you take the combination of math and science, math especially, so you deal with a probability factor. Like
yeah,
I've seen the people that could come and kind of like read a room and kind of you know so how does somebody count cards, right?
mm,
There's a probability factor to what the next card's going to be. I truly believe that in those circumstances that um again, I don't want to say that there's not this crossover of life after death into the world. Like I don't know enough to say, but I don't believe that every fortune teller can tell, like it's not Ghost where, you know, Whoopi Goldberg's character was like it's in the blood and then like I don't want to believe that. Do I believe in kind of like the Nikolai Tesla energy thing, that energy exists. When somebody dies, that there's an energy force that can continue on after somebody goes. I I believe in something of that level. Whether or not you go see somebody sitting in this little house in a room that smells like incense and they got a crystal all in front of them,
mm.
I think that is far more of a novelty. Do I believe that there is a crossover? I believe that there definitely could be. I'm not saying it's something that happens in every town and gypsies that come into, the way they used to come in. I don't believe that. Like I think that, are there people that are charlatans that will prey off of
100%.
somebody's
Yeah.
um, you know, that somebody wants to believe, and that's why I say with our app, we are not we're not trying to bring back the dead. That's not what we're doing. We're not we're not claiming to be the Ouija board or um we're bringing somebody back. We're creating, and we say, in artificial intelligence. We're not magicians. We're not fortune tellers. We're using artificial intelligence to recreate a person that you can have a conversation with. And if you forget for a second that it's a loved one, right?
Mhm.
We talked about this. Next year is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Okay? How many books have been written about Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, of the 56 men that signed the Declaration of Independence? That instead of Disney doing all of presidents, that you could have these 56 men either in robotic form, hologram form, and you could ask them questions what life was like in Philadelphia at the time, and that they could give you an easy answer based on being tied to all, all of that in a simple answer.
Right.
It's not that we're taking what was important to somebody, a person that was like, after the obituary is written, after the body goes in the ground or they're cremated, whatever the is going to happen to that person. What's that person's legacy, and can you continue that legacy of the person through what we're doing? And that's what we hope to do. And that's why I say, like, I don't. I want to believe that people could contact the other side. I know a lot of people that are ghost hunters and go out there and, they go to haunted hotels, or they go out, to places where there's high energy. You know, is it for entertainment purposes? I don't know. I, I don't want to say I'm a skeptic, but I'm more of a skeptic to that world than I am to, if you when I lost my fiance, I wanted to believe that she was with me. And so, if something weird happened to the TV, did I want to believe it was her? Of course. You know, did I have to go talk to somebody to say, is my TV, the reason why I'm contacting her? No. But but if you want to believe, you're going to believe. If you get a simple sign, you're going to believe.
I The reason why I ask is I'm 100% certain you're gonna get people, religious groups or otherwise, who have very strong opinions about what, even if it's unintentional, what you're creating. So, like, I'm a huge Art Bell fan, if you can't tell. Huge Coast to Coast AM, love all that stuff, and, the whole idea of a Ouija board being like a radio, and it's not like the Ouija board itself is magical. It's just that if there were something out there that that wanted to communicate with you, whether that be your dead grandma or whether that be something that wants to pretend to be your dead grandma to play at your heartstrings. People say this about Ouija boards, about fortune tellers, about tarot cards, all this stuff. You may be potentially inviting something that you don't want. And, I think about like that old movie, The Ghost in the Machine or something like that, where even if it's not your intention, uh, I mean, there's the possibility, of course, that your AI becomes sentient and the version of my passed on grandfather that I made on your app becomes self-aware and then starts making decisions or something like that. But then there's also the factor of like, how do I know that it's not Beelzebub or whatever talking through my grandpa, influencing me to do things that I wouldn't ordinarily want to do.
Of course.
Yeah.
Again, it's, you know, you talk about self-awareness. It's pure, like, what you want, what you want to believe, what you were raised to believe. You, think about when technology changed, and we went from like letters to emails, and suddenly all these things that was happening so fast that you know I mean, I know people that are doing church through Zoom calls now,
I know, right?
and and so, does it become lazy? Is it lazy, or is it that it's good that you could do that So because you normally wouldn't go to church, so therefore you're going to church because you wouldn't go to church if it wasn't available. So I think that, we take technology and we have to ask ourselves what works, what doesn't for us. And I think that, you know, and the Ouija board is never something because like made by Parker Brothers and it's made in China and then comes here and then, suddenly it's like, you know, here, here's the Ouija board and it's like, why is this the gateway to something else? Like if you found like, you know, if you found the Ouija board like you found Jumanji, and suddenly it's like, ooh, look at this. It's like a 15th century Ouija board, you know.
Yep.
But going to ordering a Ouija board off Amazon doesn't seem like that I'm gonna sit there and communicate with my dad through that and feel that that's really working, you know. Um, and I think that when you walk into I think that going to see a fortune teller or somebody that's going to read tarot cards and things like that, that I truly believe that there is a model that they follow to how they get you to open up in what I always, somebody walks in, they're wearing a cross around their neck, right? So the odds are that there is a John or a Matthew or a Joseph in the family, right? I mean, in probability of that. So they know who is this person, and then they watch your reaction. It's 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 like sleight of hand. How does somebody know what card you picked, right? It's because they're feeding you that card. It's magic is not magic. Magic is sleight of hand. No, you're not sawing somebody in half. You know, it's how the trick is done, and
Right.
for the audience to believe that the trick is done. And I just think that there is the same level of probability that goes into that as there is into um fortune tellers.
Yeah, I think that's the most measured opinion you could have about it. But I think you're also gonna have a lot of people who disagree, and that's just gonna be something you gotta deal
Listen,
with, yeah.
listen. I don't want to tell somebody don't believe it.
Yep.
I if you ask me what people believe, I'll say, you know what? If you go there and you feel that that person made you feel better, that person earned their money, and you feel better. That's a good, you know what? That's a good transaction. That's like going to a restaurant, having a good meal, and paying for the meal. It's how you feel. It's not that whether they really communicated, it's how you leave there. If you feel satisfied, great. I don't want to step in. I don't want to kill somebody's business. But
Right.
if you go there and somebody says, "Hey, I went to this great fortune teller," I'd be like, "Okay, I'm happy for you. I'm not gonna put them down for going to a fortune teller. If that's what they believe, then so be it."
Right.
Again, like religion, I don't want to tell somebody what they should believe or not believe. I love, you know, to each his own.
Mm. Well, this has, actually been, like, really surprisingly, sober conversation. I I'm not gonna lie, I had prepared myself for either or, like, either you were gonna be a really cool, charming person or it was gonna be, like, some serious Dr. Frankenstein kinda shit. You kinda blown me
No,
away.
no,
Yeah.
listen. I mean, like when there was a pathway to get to this point, and it
Yep.
wasn't a wake up one morning and say, "I'm going to create an AI app." It really was a process of starting with my dad. And somebody, just recently, somebody asked me if I would um create my fiance that passed away in this app. And I
Mm.
said, absolutely not. And they said, why? I said, because she belongs to her parents. She doesn't belong to me.
Sure.
And I truly believe that. And I wouldn't do that because and I wouldn't ask her parents, and it's just something I wouldn't do. Um, and I think that it has to be a decision by a family, or if somebody, if it's a only child that wants to do that. But I think that, that's going to be between them to argue, the same way that, if you ever had to sell a property of people who died and people have different versions of what they think is the right thing. There's not many things that families agree on after somebody dies. Um, so, let them sort it out, and, we're there to be the portal if they choose to choose Eternal Diary. And I mean, Tyler, this has been great. I mean, I love the long talk, and I'm glad. I mean, you asked some great questions, I got to tell you.
Um, so the app is scheduled for September 25.
September 5, 9/5.
Gotcha. Okay. So
9/5, 25.
maybe we follow up sometime after that and see how it's going. This has been really cool.
You let me know. I'd love to come back, and I really appreciate, because I welcome people that I'd rather have people that are a little skeptical or fully skeptical, but you truly are professional, and you really, came into this, whatever your beliefs were, but you allowed a true open mind to, to listen and draw your own conclusion. Whether we persuaded you, I really appreciate the honesty and everything that you did.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how, like, even just my audience reacts to it. And I think that the conversation about it will be enlightening no matter what. Like, people are.
And, for information, it's theeternaldiary.com.
Mhm.
If you have any feedback, there's a contact form. It comes to me, and I welcome anything. If you want to criticize, you want to call me a ghoul, that's the American way. You have every right to do it.
It'll all be in the episode notes, so people are on YouTube and Spotify.
Yeah.
I'll have the website there for them and everything. But yeah, appreciate you, and I'll see you.
I appreciate
see
the
you.
time. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Yes, sir. Peace.
Have a great one. God bless.
Well, I mean, like I said in the interview, first of all, thank you to Lee for coming on the show and being willing to talk about all this stuff. No matter how you feel about AI, how you feel about the morals and ethics of how this all works, I hope that this is super informative, and I hope that it'll help you to make an informed decision as you go about the wild west of the world that we're living in right now with technology. Thank you to all of our wonderful Patreon supporters. You guys are amazing. You're awesome. And I love you so much. Holy shit. I could not have gotten here without you. So I don't know how to express it other than to just say, like, you're part of the team. Even if you have, like, the same mixed feelings I do about some of the stuff that we talk about on here. It's like, I hope that you're still getting something out of it. And if you are out there listening to this, you'd like to be a supporter of the show, there's more than one way to do it. You don't have to just do Patreon or whatever. You can go to the support tab on inthekeep.com and find a plethora of ways. I did introduce recently the Buy Me a Book feature, which I will totally honor because I love books, and that'll be your way of dictating what I talk about on the show, because I'm usually like paying attention to whatever I'm reading is what I'm paying attention to during that duration of that time. I'll move it to the top of the reading list if you said one. I love you. God love you. Stay in the keep. Let's take a moment to talk about Appalachia TCG. Whether you're searching for sports cards, Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood, Pokemon, or Yu-Gi-Oh!, they can offer you an extensive selection to suit every collector and competitor. As an official reseller, they are committed to providing authentic booster packs, singles, accessories, and rare finds that set them apart from competitors. They buy and sell lots of trading cards and toys, but their special is the flesh and blood trading card game. And they run official events, pre-releases, and more. Along with their ever-growing community, Appalachia TCG is the premium spot for trading, buying, and selling cards. I know what you're thinking, but I don't live in Eastern Kentucky. Well, that's the best part. You can shop online and in person. There is the official TCG player shop, eBay store, and online shop. Head on over to AppalachiaTCG.com. That's AppalachiaTCG.com. Tell them In the Keep sent you.
Hi, I'm Ben, host of the Field and Foley podcast. Every episode I sit down with incredible guests, not just sound designers, field recorders or musicians, but experts in everything about audio. We explore the creative process behind the sounds that shape our favorite games, films and experiences. Whether you're an audio professional or just someone who loves great sound, Field and Foley offers deep dives, behind the scenes stories and insights you won't hear anywhere else.